I think so. Yeah. We have every. Order. These colleagues, the Assembly is now in public session. Could I ask members when they are invited to contribute from the floor if they will clearly state their name and legislature? If possible, members are encouraged to stand when speaking, as this will support the broadcast of the Assembly, which is live via the UK Parliament YouTube channel. If members prefer, they may of course remain seated when speaking. We are in the happy position where the measures put in place to minimise the risk of the spread of COVID on the parliamentary estate are in the course of being relaxed. Members are nevertheless encouraged to wear a face covering when not speaking. Finally, and noting that proceedings are public and being broadcast, may I remind members that the proceedings of this body do not attract parliamentary privilege. Members, again I want to welcome you all here to our plenary meeting. We're delighted to be holding this 61st plenary session of the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly in the historic surroundings of the Palace of Westminster. This is our first in-person BIPA plenary since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. We had our first ever virtual plenary in February 2021, and while it was wonderful that technology allowed us to get together virtually and conduct BIPA's business, today is a welcome return to in-person meetings to conduct the important business of the Assembly. As you know, the British-Irish interparliamentary body was established in 1990, and we've seen a lot of change in the intervening years. BIPA has become an important body for strengthening interparliamentary relations, not just between the UK and Ireland, but also with the other BIPA jurisdictions. I hope that as we move forward, the work of BIPA will continue to grow and develop, and that the links and connections between all BIPA jurisdictions will flourish and thrive. You have all been circulated with an up-to-date list of our Assembly's membership. We have received apologies from the following: Irish members Patrick Costello TD, Peter Fitzpatrick TD, Matthew McGrath TD, John Paul Phelan TD, Senator Francis Black, Senator Vincent P. Martin. British members Gregory Campbell MP, Lord Donoghue, Lord Murphy and Rosie Cooper MP. From the devolved administration, Willie Coffey MSP, Andrew Moore MLA, Deputy Al Brewer, and Honourable Joanne Watterson, Speaker of the House of Keys. I would first like to offer condolences to the family of Sir David Amos. He was an associate member and friend of the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly. And again, I wish to extend our sincere sympathies to his wife Julia, his children David, Catherine, Sarah, Alexandra and Florence, and all the members of his extended family, and indeed to his colleagues in Westminster. I should also like to offer condolences to the family of Christopher Stalford, the Principal Deputy Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly, who was so recently tragically taken from us at a very young age. Our sincere sympathies are extended to his wife Laura, his children Trinity, Oliver, Cameron and Abigail, and all other members of his extended family.
Thank you, Co-Chair Brendan. My Lords, ladies and gentlemen, as Co-Chair of the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly, I would firstly like to welcome you here back to our first in-person meeting since the start of the pandemic. I'm sorry that the meeting was postponed in October, and I ask for your understanding as to why that happened. The day before the Assembly was due to convene, a murder took place of our dear friend and colleague, Sir David Amos, who had been Member of Parliament for Southend West since 1983, for Basildon and then Southend West, 38 years serving in this House. It was a tragic day for us all. David was a man who had friends on all sides of the chamber, a man of integrity, a true lover of this country, a patriot, and someone that we miss very dearly. And so today we meet in the aftermath of that tragic occurrence, and I thank you all for your kind words of sympathy and generosity shown to all of us and to David's wife following his murder. Particularly thank my co-chair Brendan for the heartfelt message he sent to me on behalf of the Assembly the day after the murder. So we gather here today in London. The British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly is back, but we remember those who we have lost. And we've also spoken about Christopher Stortford. And I thank you for the kind words about that gentleman as well, who I actually personally didn't know. But we remember two friends today, and I would ask you to please be upstanding just for one moment as we remember both Sir David and Christopher. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning to you all, and again a welcome to London for our Assembly. It's lovely to see you all back. So we want to adopt the programme of business, and I'm delighted to welcome so many of you here today, some for the first time, many new members of our British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly. It's lovely to see so many new faces, and Brendan and I look forward to working with you in the coming months and years ahead. And I believe that members will have received a copy of the business today. You should have a programme in front of you. This was agreed yesterday by the Steering Committee. So during this plenary, we will be focusing on some of our discussions on the urgent challenges facing us as parliamentarians. The most urgent challenge facing all parliamentarians across Europe and indeed the world today is, of course, the horrific situation we now see taking place in Ukraine and the shocking and unprovoked assault on an independent nation by the forces of Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation. Colleagues, the Steering Committee was unanimous yesterday that the Assembly should be given the opportunity to send a strong and unequivocal message of support to the people of Ukraine and the country's democratic institutions. That is why, as the very first item of business, the Steering Committee has proposed that the Assembly adopt the resolution on Ukraine, which should be before you this morning. While our business programme, with several invited speakers whom you will wish to question, does not allow a debate to be scheduled, colleagues will note that the Ministers for Europe of the governments of both the United Kingdom and of Ireland will both be addressing the Assembly today. So that will give us the opportunity to ask questions and raise the issue of Ukraine. After the Assembly has decided on the resolution on Ukraine, we will hear an address from the Right Honourable James Cleverly MP, who is the Minister for Europe and North America. After that, the Right Honourable Conor Burns MP, Minister of State for Northern Ireland, will address the Assembly. We will then hear from Thomas Byrne TD, who is the Minister of State for European Affairs in the Government of Ireland, followed by the Right Honourable Sir Keir Starmer MP, who is Leader of Her Majesty's Official Opposition. In the afternoon, the Right Honourable Sir Geoffrey Donaldson MP, Leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, will address the Assembly, followed by John Finucane MP, representing the Sinn Féin. The business of the Assembly will conclude with updates from the BIPA committee chairs, A, C and D, where John Lahart TD will also present Committee B's report to the Assembly entitled Interim Report Vaccine Rollouts. We expect the 61st plenary session to conclude around 3 o'clock this afternoon. So, given we have a full agenda, I would like to request that all members keep their questions and contributions as short and succinct as possible. during the course of the day. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure now to invite the Vice Chairman of the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly, Karen Smith MP, to formally move the adoption of the proposed programme of business to be agreed. Karen.
And particularly welcoming people here to London. It's delightful to see everybody, and I beg to move that the Assembly adopt the programme as suggested by the Steering Committee.
Thank you very much, Karen. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Brendan.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Colleagues, the first item of business is the motion, as Andrew said, on Ukraine proposed by the Steering Committee. I now call on Brendan Howland TD to move the motion formally, and then we will put the question to the Assembly without debate. Brendan.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I propose on behalf of the Steering Committee, as the Co-Chair has said, the following resolution, and that it be adopted. That the Assembly condemns in the strongest terms the attack by President Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation on Ukraine, stands in solidarity with the Verkhovna Rada and all democratically elected representatives of the Ukrainian people, unreservedly supports the freedom of the people of Ukraine, and underlines its support for Ukraine's sovereignty, freedom and territorial integrity, and the right of the people of Ukraine to determine their own destiny.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Colleagues, is that motion agreed? Agreed unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Our clerks will arrange for the text of this resolution to be sent to the ambassadors of Ukraine to Ireland and to the United Kingdom and to the Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament. Andrew?
Thank you very much, Brendan. Is Minister Cleverly here now? Don't think he is. So we have a little bit of a gap while we're waiting for James Cleverly to arrive. I think he's in the other room having a bilateral meeting with Minister Byrne. So I'm sure he'll be here in a moment. So just to say a few announcements I can give you before the Minister arrives. We're going to have a group photograph later on, and that's going to be immediately after the morning session before we go to lunch. So please don't rush to lunch. Please hang around for our historic group photograph in Westminster Hall. We'll be on the stairs leading up to the IPU and CPA room. So please don't go straight to lunch, wait for the group photograph. This is in fact the first time ever the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly has met within the precincts of the Palace of Westminster. So it's going to be a memorable photograph, so please stay for that. And we go to lunch in the House of Lords in the Cholmondeley room straight afterwards, and myself and others will guide you down if you don't know the route. So I think the Minister's now arrived. James, please come in. Hello, Conor. Morning.
Morning, Conor.
Stay with us, fine. So, ladies and gentlemen, it now gives me great pleasure to welcome the Minister of State for Europe and North America, the Right Honourable James Cleverly MP. James has only fairly recently taken up the role, having previously been Minister for the Middle East, I believe, and prior to that was Chairman of the Conservative Party. He's the Member of Parliament for Braintree in the great county of Essex, which is the same county that I am a Member of Parliament for. So it gives me extremely great pleasure to welcome James to our British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly this morning and invite him to address us. James.
Andrew, thank you. Thank you very much. Look, perfect timing, perfect timing. Good morning, friends, colleagues. It is a genuine pleasure to be here today in my new capacity as Minister for Europe and North America. And I'm sure that everybody will want to join me, and I don't know whether this has already been done, I suspect it probably has, in paying tribute to Sir David Amess, who was, of course, a great friend to so many of us. And we also extend our sympathies to the friends and family and colleagues of Christopher Stalford. I'm glad that my counterpart, Thomas Byrne, is with us here today. They say you never start a speech with an apology, and I apologise for starting a speech with an apology, because the apology I'm going to give is that Thomas and I were so enthralled in our discussions that we overran ever so slightly. So I do apologise for being a little bit late. And I would also like to thank the co-chairs, Brendan Smith and Andrew Rosdell, for putting this on. A strong working relationship between Dublin and Westminster is, of course, incredibly important, and it's great to have colleagues here from Westminster Parliament, but also from Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, I believe Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, even. Fantastic. It's great, genuinely great to have the whole of the islands represented here, celebrating the strength of the relationship. These are, however, dark days following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Putin's violence has brought into sharp relief the importance of our close friendship and the power that collectively we can bring to bear to address those challenges. And it's heartening to see that both the UK and Ireland have spoken with one voice, condemning Putin's attack on a free, sovereign, democratic European state. We've already seen that Putin is attempting to portray the West as divided, and to try and lie and to try and deceive in an effort to sow division amongst us. And I have no doubt that he will fail. Because what we have seen instead is that we are working more closely together, perhaps than ever. And that no doubt he will pay for his aggression. And I welcome the remarks from your Tannister last week. Ireland's unwavering and unconditional support is so incredibly important. I'm enormously grateful for the close working relationship that the UK and Ireland have, both as fellow Security Council members and on the OSCE, and we will continue to stand together against violence and tyranny. Obviously, I also need to address a few words on some of the shared problems and challenges that we have closer to home. Whatever the headlines say about the debate over the Northern Ireland Protocol, the truth is, and Thomas and I discussed this, ultimately we share the same goal, which is ensuring that there is peace and prosperity in Northern Ireland. And together we will deal with those challenges as friends, and we will do it through dialogue and partnership and ever closer working. And that is exactly why this organisation is such an important forum. And the conversation that it enables is a fantastic way to build on the relationship between politicians throughout Britain, Ireland and the Common Travel Area. And I welcome the work done by the BIPA, by its committee, with members from across parliamentary assemblies. For instance, the Economic Committee's investigation into post-Brexit trading relations. This is tough, detailed work with many, many hours spent looking through long, dry, technical documents. And I thank you for doing it. I thank you for doing it because it is tough but incredibly important work, and it will be an incredibly helpful contribution towards a better understanding of the situation. I'm very, very grateful for it. And I'm sure that there will still be outstanding issues with the Northern Ireland Protocol which need to be addressed, but ultimately these will be solved when we work closely together for the benefit of citizens, businesses and stability in Northern Ireland and, of course, beyond. The UK and Ireland have a responsibility to protect the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions. The Northern Ireland situation, north-south, and between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. And we all need to be flexible and put the needs of people at the forefront to resolve this. But I have absolute confidence that it can and will be done. And it's my hope that a durable solution to these issues is agreed swiftly. As you know, the Northern Ireland Secretary has been engaged closely with the Irish Government and the parties in Northern Ireland, whilst both governments have had enduring commitments to peace, prosperity in Northern Ireland. There is so much that our countries can offer each other, so much more that our countries can offer each other. We're building even stronger and more prosperous relations. Let me therefore turn to the wider UK-Irish relationship and its potential, because we are seeing so much positive progress. Look at the opening of the fantastic new Consulates General in Manchester and Cardiff last year. These new offices serve as a symbol of success for our deepening friendship. The North of England and Wales have also now joined Ireland's diplomatic network. And this will help bring the people of Britain and Ireland closer together than ever before, sparking more opportunities for cooperation, for prosperity and more. It reflects on the close ties between England and Ireland, forged by people crossing the Irish Sea over centuries. You'll be familiar with the long-running programme from our embassy in Dublin called Joining the Dots. This programme has convened city leaders, businesses and researchers in Limerick, Cork, Coventry and Birmingham, and promotes economic links and the opportunities between regions of the UK and the southwest and west of Ireland. And this year, the Embassy will build on its virtual events with programmes in Galway, with Leeds and Bradford. The recent Levelling Up white paper identifies the role played by local leadership, strong communities, innovation and business finance to drive mutually beneficial opportunities. And returning briefly to the international picture, the UK and Ireland also work together on the world stage. Last year, we set out our vision for the UK's role in the world over the next decade in our integrated review. And the integrated review addressed security, defence, development and foreign policy. We were and are working closely with Ireland on these areas, but there is always scope to do more, as the events of the last week have highlighted so starkly. From the work we've already done on the UN Security Council, turning the tide against those who would seek to undermine the international rules-based system, to protect human rights, to promote inclusion. Of course, we need to be constantly vigilant, and we need to continue working on this. We need to support global health systems and get 40 million more girls into school by 2025. And I was delighted that both the UK and Ireland made record pledges at the Global Partnership for Education conference last summer. And I welcome Ireland's increased ambition on climate action and commitments made at COP26, as well as the new Climate Action and Low Carbon Act. And I understand the Act formalises the national climate objectives of a resilient, biodiverse, sustainable and climate neutral economy no later than 2025. And we're proud that the world's first major economy to legislate for net zero, we have a 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, and the Prime Minister will mobilise £12 billion of government investment, leveraged up to 3 times by private investment by 2023. So both countries working hand in hand on this incredibly important agenda. Our collective goals are deeply ambitious, the strength of our relationship incredibly important, and this will be reinforced, I'm very pleased to say, by the royal visit that will be coming to Ireland next month. There are fantastic opportunities that our two countries can seize together, and above all, I believe that the UK-Ireland partnership can be a powerful, positive force for change in the world, and I look forward to working with you on that agenda. Thank you so very much.
I want to thank Minister Cleverly for addressing us here this morning. I'm pleased to invite our next speaker. I now call on the Right Honourable Conor Byrne, MP, Minister of State for Northern Ireland, to give his address. And I would like to welcome you, Minister, to our Assembly. We will hear your address and then there will be some questions from members for the Ministers. So I now invite Minister Byrne to address us.
Thank you, co-chairs. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation to be with you this morning and also for your kindness in inviting me to join you for the pre-plenary dinner last night. That felt for me in many ways a little bit of a homecoming, for I had several very enjoyable years as a member of this body and have experienced personally the massive contribution that this body makes to understanding in these islands. This isn't just the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly. This Assembly comprises all the elected assemblies of these islands, our counterparts in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man. And in the years since your inception in 1990, you have done incredible work bringing people together, facilitating a forum for discussion and for understanding, a forum where both privately and formally differences can be addressed and ideas can be floated. We have differences in these islands, and in recent years those differences have come to the fore, not least in the aftermath of the United Kingdom's decision to leave the European Union. But organisations like BIPA, I think, are underpinned in a sense by the guiding philosophy that Lord Denning, the late Master of the Rolls, outlined when he said, "Two reasonable people can perfectly reasonably reach opposite conclusions based on the same set of facts without each surrendering their right to be considered a reasonable person." Those are words I often bring to mind as I visit people of different traditions from the divided communities in Northern Ireland. The Prime Minister and the Taoiseach speak regularly on a whole range of issues, and despite what you might read and hear, I would contend that that relationship closely echoes those between Thatcher and Fitzgerald, Major and Reynolds, Blair and Ahern, Cameron and Kennedy. The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and myself have close relationships with our Irish counterparts, and Michael Gove, as Minister responsible from the UK Government for the devolved administrations, has regularly, indeed weekly, calls with our counterparts in those areas. But, my friends, the work of BIPA is central to that work of understanding. Through your biannual plenary meetings, your committee work, your events and debate, you help to build the bonds of trust and understanding that lay the foundations for the strong working relationship between the UK and Ireland that we enjoy. And for that, my friends, I thank you. I returned to my home town of Belfast in September of last year, and I visited my old primary school, Park Lodge, on the Antrim Road in North Belfast. And one of the young people there asked me what was different about Belfast today, different from when I was there in the 70s and very early 80s. And I answered that obviously one major difference was that half of the school audience were female. They were all boys in my day. It was a brothers' school. But I said the substantive difference that I would see would be that when I would walk to school along the Antrim Road, the police would be in armoured Land Rovers. There would be British Army presence on the streets. Bombs were a regular occurrence. There was a gate in Royal Avenue into the centre of Belfast. A man got onto the bus to check people's bags as they travelled to shop in Belfast city centre during the day. That is not the case now. Northern Ireland lives in a completely different environment. And that was made possible by the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which next year we will mark the 25th anniversary of. That agreement was a great landmark in the history not just of Northern Ireland, but of these islands as a whole. It enshrined the principle of consent, settling Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom for as long as the people of Northern Ireland wished to be part of that union. It established political institutions to give expression to all communities in Northern Ireland. It created new bodies to foster greater north-south and east-west cooperation. And it reaffirmed the birthright of the people of Northern Ireland to their identity and citizenship and ensured their rights were protected in law. And in so doing, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement gave birth to a more peaceful, stable and prosperous Northern Ireland. But, my friends, we should not live under the illusion that the work is complete. When you visit parts of Northern Ireland today, communities still live in the shadow of peace walls. In a very real sense, Northern Ireland lives in a text-based absence of violence, and there remains so much to do to build genuine cross-community understanding and respect. When you visit communities in Derry, Strabane, Castlederg and both sides of the divide in Belfast, you see the urgency of that work that still needs to take place. Earlier this year, I was in Belfast for the Four Corners Festival, a cross-community coming together driven by two clergy, Father Martin McGill of St John's on the Falls Road and the Reverend Tracy McRoberts, a Protestant clergywoman from the Shankill. A groundbreaking event opened with a message from the Holy Father, Pope Francis, and closed by an in-person speech by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Unprecedented and would have been inconceivable 25 years ago. My friends, behind the agreement that is making so much of that possible lies the fundamental principle of devolved power sharing, of shared government. And the last 2 years have given us a very clear sign that when the Northern Ireland parties work together, much can be achieved. And we must not allow ourselves, by accident or design, to return to a state of political deadlock, which the only people who will suffer will be the people of Northern Ireland themselves. That is why the government is absolutely committed to a return to power sharing and urges all the parties to commit themselves to power sharing in the run-up to the elections on the 5th of May. That will be the opportunity of the people of Northern Ireland to elect a new assembly. We passionately believe that decisions taken in Northern Ireland should be taken by people elected in Northern Ireland and accountable to the people of Northern Ireland at the ballot box. And a restored executive will be fundamental in driving economic recovery. Last year, the whole of the UK economy returned to growth. It grew by 4.6% in Northern Ireland in the third quarter of 2021. And levelling up, the mission of the government in which I serve, is vital for all areas of this country, but especially Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland has so many of the ingredients required for economic success: exceptional talent, creativity and innovation. And this, together with the scenery, the tourism and the rich cultural and artistic heritage, make Northern Ireland a great place to live, to work, to do business and, my friends, to invest. We are expanding into industries with enormous future growth potential, such as cybersecurity, where there are now 2,300 cyber professionals working in over 100 companies in Northern Ireland. Belfast is ranked in the top 25 tech city in the world. Sorry, in the UK, second only to London. We've got a vibrant fintech, health and life sciences and advanced engineering sector in Northern Ireland. It is our task as government to showcase that. In September last year, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland led the Business and Innovation Showcase in London as part of our centenary programme. In November, the Trade Secretary chaired the Board of Trade in Derry, highlighting the fantastic ecosystem of Northern Ireland commerce. And only a couple of weeks ago, I visited Dubai and Abu Dhabi, where I supported the first ever Northern Ireland Day at the Dubai World Expo, where we supported Northern Ireland businesses such as White's Oats, Kyverco and Greenfields, and promoted the fantastic opportunities Northern Ireland has to investors, where I also met some significant sovereign wealth funds who accepted my invitation to come and look at the investment opportunities in Northern Ireland. But the fact remains that Northern Ireland continues to punch below its weight economically. Despite its many strengths, many communities are still in serious deprivation. We have the highest proportion of adults without qualifications in the UK, the highest proportion of economically inactive adults, and too high a proportion of Northern Ireland's brightest and best leave Ireland and do not return. That is why the agenda for levelling up and delivering policies and investment that will grow Northern Ireland's economy are absolutely vital. Let me just spell out the scale of both the task and the opportunity. Northern Ireland's economic output today stands at 42 billion. If we could close that productivity gap to the UK average within a decade, then Northern Ireland could be generating £16 billion more each year in today's prices. That would be around £8,500 per person. That's why we're putting money into the Community Renewal Fund, the Levelling Up Fund, and the Shared Prosperity Fund. And these are having real impacts on real communities on the ground in Northern Ireland. For example, the 300,000 to develop a brand new digital hub on the site of the former PSNI station in Cushendall, County Antrim, that I visited just a few weeks ago. £2 billion for the New Decade New Approach financial package, over £600 million for the City and Growth Deal programme across Northern Ireland, and £400 million in New Deal funds for Northern Ireland, in addition to £55 million in support of firms in Northern Ireland to adapt to the post-Brexit trading environment. My friends, those are figures, but they represent opportunities for real people in Northern Ireland. They represent the opportunities for people to have the dignity of earning their living by work and see people coming off welfare and into dignity. My friends, I want to close by saying this to you. The relationship between the United Kingdom and Ireland is a unique and special one. We can debate who our closest friends and allies are around the world, but the reality is that our economies, our cultures, our history and our futures are inextricably intertwined and will always be so for the reality of geography. BIPA, as I have said, has helped over the years build that understanding and respect, and that work continues today. And I was delighted last night at dinner to meet and talk to Minister Byrne and accept his invitation to visit Dublin and indeed to visit his own constituency. And I accept that invitation warmly and wholeheartedly, because it is by building relationships and understanding that we advance the interests of all our people in these islands. I thanked you earlier for all that you do to support that agenda. I always remember in one of my favourite lines of Yes Minister, when Sir Humphrey explained to Bernard that in politics gratitude is merely a lively expectation of favours to come. Can I close by thanking you for all you have done and thanking you for all you will do in the decades ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Burns. We now take questions from the floor for both Minister Cleverly and Minister Burns. So, Senator Neil O'Donnell is the first offering.
And thanks to both ministers for their contributions this morning. It's not the case normally in my experience of BIPA that we would comment or discuss legislation in each other's jurisdictions. But, ministers, I do want to draw your attention to the impacts for Ireland as a result of the Nationality and Borders Bill. And I took great note around the comments about peace and stability and the progress that has been made, and indeed the need for further FDI and developing international links for North and South. The consequences of the Nationality and Borders Bill would be that many of our foreign national students, our tourists, would be required to avail of an electronic travel authorisation to travel from the south into the north. Now, not only is that an affront to the Good Friday Agreement, but it's also breaching the spirit of the withdrawal agreement that said that there would be no return to a hard border on the island of Ireland. It didn't say there would be no return to a hard border for some, but for others they would have to apply for a travel waiver. So I take the opportunity to alert colleagues from Westminster about the very real impacts for people, not least, as I say, our students who may live in the south and travel into the north, foreign nationals who work for the NHS in Derry but live in Donegal. So this is a very retrograde step, and I think in the spirit of BIPA and the spirit of that collaboration that is historic in this institution, we need to say that. And I wonder if the ministers could reflect on their own views of how, given everything that they've said about progress and about the need to develop more international links and more investment, that indeed the impacts and the consequences of legislation here would be very acutely felt across the entirety of Ireland, north and south. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator O'Donnell. We'll take one more question and we'll have the group questions. Neil Richmond, TD, offered. Neil.
Margaret, Keirla, and I'd like to thank the ministers for their very engaging remarks. And I have a slightly more practical question. You both referred to it in your remarks in relation to the importance of bilateral relationships between our ministers. And I was wondering if you could lay out the concrete proposals that your government would have to ensure that those bilateral relationships are bedded in. The opportunity for ministers to meet informally at European Council meetings is now a thing of the past. How can we replace that going forward to ensure that our two governments are working as close as possible as they were before, to ensure that not only the informal discussions but the formal discussions are going? It's particularly important post-pandemic now that we can meet again in person. I think this is something that I would hope would have a level of ambition from both the British and Irish governments, and perhaps there are tools within the Good Friday Agreement that would allow for that as well. Go Margaret.
Thank you, Neil. Ministers? James.
Thank you. Yes, so the Borders Bill. So I'll start with the most general comment, which of course is how much we value the free travel area, how much we value Irish nationals here in the UK. I completely take the point that you make about some of the practical implications. I can't give you anything like a kind of detailed answer, but I can assure you that issues like this are things that we are considering and looking at how we have a practical, pragmatic response which abides by the philosophy that you outlined. I know my civil servants in the room. I suspect Conor's got his team in the room as well. They will have made notes of the point that you make, the strength of feeling behind it, and also in the positive spirit of resolution in which you delivered it. And so, whilst I can't give you a kind of a granular answer at all, as I say, everything we do on this is going to be underpinned with those as a principle. With regard to the bilateral relationship at ministerial level, actually, Minister Byrne and I discussed this when we met beforehand, and I made the point that some of the fora where British and Irish ministers would have been able to, have a little kind of coffee in the margins or whatever, some of those related to the European Union, obviously we have extracted ourselves from. There are still other fora where we will have the opportunity to meet, and I have no doubt that we will take full advantage of those. But implicit in your question, I think, is a really important point, that having chosen to step out of the European Union, I think the UK actually does have a real responsibility to make sure we replicate that level of bilateral engagement that the European Union would have provided in the margins in other fora. I happen to think that's a really good thing. I happen to think that it imposes a bit of a structural discipline on the UK, that we're going to have to be really proactive in our international relations, our bilateral relations with Ireland and also other European countries. I'm now the Minister for making sure those relations work, and I can guarantee you that I will be throwing myself at it with gay abandon. So I'm really keen to strengthen that bilateral relationship, and I was very pleased that that Minister Byrne and I discussed visiting each other's not only capitals but also more broadly across the country as well.
Thank you, Minister.
Just very briefly,
Yes,
just to echo what James said, look, the points on the Nationality and Borders Bill are heard and understood, and there are continuing conversations across government. Legislation evolves due to practical implications of it, and it's important we keep dialogue open. On the question, look, it's absolutely right that the words of Kipping, let's admit it frankly as a business people should. We've had no end of a lesson, it will do us no end of a good. We've got to a point now where it's almost newsworthy when Simon Coveney comes to London. That's not helpful. Northern Ireland, which is my principal interest in all of this, Northern Ireland's interests are best served when the relationship between London and Dublin is warm, is frequent and close. And look, there are ways that we are continuing to do that. I was at the British-Irish Council in Cardiff, where I had good conversations with Leah Varadkar and also with the Taoiseach. We had the British-Irish Intergovernmental in London in December, where Simon Coveney came representing the Irish government. I would pay huge tribute, by the way, to the Irish ambassador who's with us here this morning. Adrian does a fantastic job of channeling communications, not just between government, but also with parliamentarians between here and Dublin. But frankly, I think there are also things that we can be doing more on together, and I'm very interested in this. I know the Secretary of State is also. There are commitments that the Irish government entered into under New Decade, New Approach that have all-Ireland implications, for example, in transport connectivity, and that was discussed at the British-Irish Intergovernmental. And what I would say is, as far as the Secretary of State, myself, the Northern Ireland Office are concerned, we stand ready to receive invitations to come south of the border at any time. I would welcome those enthusiastically. Minister Byrne, I said, invited me, and I've enthusiastically accepted that. But I think it's incumbent upon both of us to ensure that that partnership remains close and frequent, and to look at the mechanisms under the agreements and make sure we're exploiting them to the full extent that they were intended.
Thank you very much, Minister. Lord John Kilclooney.
Chairman, Ministers, as one of those who negotiated the Belfast Agreement, I recall Article 1 agreed between the two governments that there could be no change in the status of Northern Ireland without consulting the people of Northern Ireland. I believe that there is now a breach of the Belfast Agreement. To Minister Cleverly, I would say that when we decided to leave the European Union, our government decided to have free ports in the United Kingdom. We still have no free port in Northern Ireland. Is this because of the Northern Ireland Protocol and the checks on trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
Thank you very much, Lord Kilclooney. Lord Reg MP. Reg.
Chair, when the protocol was being negotiated, both the European Union and the United Kingdom have repeatedly pledged their support for the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in all its aspects. Can I ask ministers, are they prepared to look at that agreement, at its structures and possible adaptations of its structures to solve the protocol problem? We understand there has to be a treaty relationship between the European Union and the United Kingdom. Fully understand that. But it isn't sustainable that large areas of our economy in Northern Ireland are run now and regulated by a foreign power, i.e. the European Union, and the local community has no say in that. the institutions of the agreement could be adapted to facilitate the end of a democratic deficit and to smooth the relations between the European Union and the United Kingdom when both sides say they're totally committed to the agreement. Would ministers be prepared to look at proposals that do exist to avoid this problem, but still maintaining a proper and appropriate treaty relationship between the UK and the EU?
Thank you, Lord MP. Ministers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to finish with an apology as well as starting with an apology. Once I've answered these two questions, I'm afraid I do have to leave because I need to make a phone call with regard to the situation in Russia-Ukraine, and therefore I'll unfortunately be missing the comments of my new friend, Mr. Byrne. With regard to the situation with free ports, I mean, the bottom line is this is an evolving policy that is rolling out, and so at the moment, of course, this is still very much in the inception stage. There's plenty of work to do with regard to the policy around new ports. I do think it's incumbent upon us to resolve the current situation with regard to trade flows in Great Britain, Northern Ireland, Ireland. And we're looking to do that, and it kind of touches upon the point that you made, my Lord, that the resolution needs to happen. It is a sticking point at the moment, and it is causing tensions which I think we would all wish to avoid. The conversations, the most recent set of negotiations that I've been involved in with Mr. Šefčovič have, I think, given me hope that there is a genuine appetite for a resolution. And we will, of course, look at wherever we can find ways of resolving this current sticking point. We want to make sure this works. We want to make sure that the principles embedded in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement are upheld, that people can feel, communities with Northern Ireland can feel part of the country that they want to I would say affiliate, but that's the wrong word, that where their head and hearts take them. And that is absolutely embedded in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We absolutely want to protect that, but we also want to make sure that that is not undermined in any way by the practicalities of the administration of goods flow. And somewhere between that, that philosophical deep principle underpinning the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and the kind of technical, logistic management of goods flow is the point where at the moment we've got to get some resolution, and we've got to come at it from both ends. So we've got to look at technicalities and details and all that boring logistical stuff, but we've also got to make sure that we have at the heart of whatever technical resolution we come up with the fundamental principles that I think everyone in Belfast, in Dublin and Westminster feel so very strongly about. I do apologise, I really, really do. I have to head off to take this phone call from one of our close allies in the East. But thank you very much, and I leave my good long-standing friend, Conor, to ask all the really tricky, difficult questions now that I've left the room.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Go for it.
Thank you. Ross Greer, MSP. Ross.
Thank you. Is that a question for James about the situation that he's now having to leave to deal with? But it's actually a piece of constituent casework that's now become so farcical. I'm desperate for some help from the UK government, so I'm going to ask it of Conor in the hope that you're able to pass it on to the relevant colleague. To cut a very long story short, I have a constituent who is a Belarusian citizen, legal resident of the UK. Her one-year-old daughter is a British citizen. They were in Belarus visiting family last week. They made the sensible decision to return. They made it as far as Lithuania, where her digital proof of residency was not accepted, so she was unable to travel on from Lithuania to the UK. We contacted the British Embassy in Lithuania. They weren't able to offer any help before the 9th of March, at which point they offered an appointment. So instead, we were able to arrange an appointment at a visa centre, the British Visa Centre in Latvia this morning. She's just been to that centre. As part of that process, they've now taken all of her documentation, all of her identification from her, and if they accept her claim and are able to issue her with new papers that would allow her to travel on to the UK, they've just informed her that for reasons we've not yet been able to get an explanation for, they will post that to a visa centre in Berlin, not where she currently is in Latvia or where she came from in Lithuania. I have a one-year-old British citizen and a British legal resident who are unable to return home, having fled the situation in the south of Belarus. So, Conor, if I contact you myself and my Westminster colleague Amy Callaghan MP, if we contact you about this situation, would you be able to pass it on to the relevant colleague? Because at this point, we are at a complete loss as to how we can help this family return home.
Thanks very much, Ross. Brendan Howland, TD.
Thanks. I suppose by necessity we often are focused on questions that relate to further division between us. So I want to ask, I hope, a more positive question. And it picked up on Minister Cleverly's commentary about energy and the decarbonisation agenda that both Ireland and the UK are following. All of the island of Ireland is an integrated energy market. We're now focused, I think probably doubly so in the last week, because of the realisation that we need to move away from our dependence on gas, particularly Russian gas. Whether there is scope, in your view, for closer cooperation between Ireland and the UK in terms of developing offshore wind in particular in the Irish Sea, and could that be a vehicle on which we could actually develop strong integrated energy patterns with investment and cooperation?
Thank you very much, Brendan. Minister?
So I might just comment on the previous two as well, if I may. Ross, in terms of your direct question, yes, look, I'm very happy to help try and disentangle that. Sounds very complicated. This is not unusual. I was dealing over the weekend with one of Sinn Féin's MPs in Northern Ireland who was asking for my help on a constituency case, some people in Belfast. So one of my private secretaries, Harry, is over there, who's now waving. If you two can try and swap details before we leave. I'll be around, by the way, for most of the rest of your sessions, because, of course, when these normally happen in some fancy hotel or something, we all mix properly. So I'm keen, despite the fact it's here, to do as we would normally do, which is to be in attendance for as much as possible. We'll try and help on that. On the energy point and closer collaboration, I'm always very careful that I'm conscious now, and I see Peter Bottomley in his place, ministers can say something very casually in Northern Ireland Matters, that ends up on the front page of the newsletter and sparks a major row. So I don't want to start a UK government calls for pan-island energy strategy. What I would say is we're always open to conversations, and energy is a particular opportunity in Northern Ireland, and the government's hydrogen strategy. There's some amazing Northern Ireland companies who are coming through on hydrogen and the new technology there, not least, by the way, Wrightbus in Ballymena, who've been absolutely pioneering, and there's Catagen in Belfast, who I visited with Kwasi Kwarteng to do the official opening of before Christmas. Just on the other two, John, on free ports, that is not off the table in Northern Ireland at all. We're having ongoing conversations across government about how that might operate in Northern Ireland, potentially where there could be a free port covering more than one location. I'm very attracted, we haven't made any policy on this, but I'm very attracted at the opportunities free ports might present to Derry, Londonderry, which has actually fallen economically relatively behind the rest of Northern Ireland, ironically, since the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. So it's certainly not off the table. And just... Well, all uncertainty around trading relationships is something you take into account when you're developing policy, because there's no point in having a policy and then events deciding that the policy is rendered impractical. But we continue to scope that out, as we have done, by the way, in conversations with the Scottish Government and elsewhere about how the models can work appropriately within devolved administrations. And just on the protocol itself, and look, I know this has become incredibly controversial, but there is a disconnect here between the real lived experience of people in Northern Ireland over the protocol, both practical in terms of products no longer being available on shelves. I'll give you one small example. Greens in Lisbon, who I visited in the autumn, telling me that they now only sell one variety of shortbread because their other suppliers have decided not to supply to Northern Ireland because shortbread requires a veterinary certificate under the protocol. I don't think, my friends, that we thought we were signing up to that. So there's the practicalities of it. And then we talk about trade diversion, trade disruption, we talk about times at ports and delays. We must also accept and be very candid about this, that when almost half the population of Northern Ireland feel that the protocol is undermining their sense of identity, their sense of belonging, their sense of nationhood, that is a problem we've got to address. And that problem is as alive and real as the practical implications of supply of products into Northern Ireland. So we have to resolve it. I think we've got to dial down the rhetoric on it and look at it very calmly, but we've got to resolve it so that if the protocol is to endure and sustain and work, it's got to be practical and it's got to have consent across community in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, thank you very much, Minister. John O'Dowd, MLA.
And this is my first attendance at the British-Irish Parliamentary Association, and I welcome and look forward to working it well up to the 5th of May. Anyway, we'll see what happens at the elections. But I was recalling when I was coming into Westminster, the last time I was here was in the summer of 2016 at the Joint Ministerial Committee on European Affairs, which was the devolved institutions come together, and I was accompanying Martin McGuinness to those discussions with all the institutions. And Martin set out quite clearly that Brexit was not good for the island of Ireland. Regardless of what position anyone else took, it wasn't going to be good for the island of Ireland. Now, lessons can be learned from that, but what we can do now is we can engage and discuss with each other. And I acknowledge my unionist colleagues' concerns about the protocol. But let's look at this from another position. I'm an elected representative for 25 years, and for the first time in my lifetime as an elected representative, they're building factories in my constituency. They're building distribution warehouses. Small, medium enterprises are expanding. A major pharmaceutical company is employing thousands of extra workers. And why? Because of the protocol. Because they can trade in both the UK and the EU. So Minister Byrne referred to improving the economic outworkings of the North. We can do that through the protocol, and we can also deal with the concerns of our unionist colleagues through negotiation. But Minister Burns, here is my concern. I have a concern that the UK government is using the genuine concerns of the unionist community in its negotiations with the EU over matters other than the protocol. So the quicker we come to a resolution of the negotiations around the protocol, your ambition to improve the economic activity within the North will be achieved.
Thank you very much, John. Karen Bradley MP. Karen.
Thank you very much. 2 points. First of all, on intergovernmental relations. I accept the point that's been made around the fact that the Belfast Good Friday Agreement does have institutions and has mechanisms that can be used for intergovernmental relations, but they are limited. And I would urge the government, both governments, to set up some formal heads of government summits. Perhaps you could even consider running them at the same time as BIPA meets, so that actually when BIPA is meeting in plenary session, we know the governments are meeting at heads of government level. I think that is incredibly important to make sure that this most vital of relations for both countries is maintained. A second point is a technical point around the trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I understand that for manufactured goods, where there are component parts which are imported into Great Britain, where we do not apply a tariff anymore, but tariffs are applied if that good was imported into the EU, the UK government is taking that tariff, but is not currently reimbursing Northern Ireland businesses that then bring that raw material into Northern Ireland to use in their manufactured goods. This is putting Northern Ireland businesses at a disadvantage to other businesses in the UK, and I would urge the government to rectify that and to make sure that that tariff is paid to the businesses as soon as possible.
Thank you, Karen. Minister Burns.
Thank you. Look, John, on the protocol, look, you know, there are companies who will tell us very strongly that the protocol represents opportunities. And I think if the protocol can be made to work and can garner, as I've said, cross-community support, and that the implementation of the protocol is proportionate. And that's why one of the things we've been saying to our friends in the Commission and the Council of the EU is that we want to try and find a mechanism to disaggregate the checks on products going into the Northern Ireland marketplace destined to remain in the Northern Ireland marketplace and those goods that are coming through Northern Ireland for onward transmission into the European Union single market. But the protocol itself makes clear in the opening paragraphs that the protocol recognises Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom single market. And in terms of, I understand it because I hear it and it's a sentiment that's expressed to me in different parts of Northern Ireland. It's not an accusation that I accept, that the government is using the protocol and unionist unease about the protocol for other agendas. And in fact, I think, the Prime Minister said this, the Secretary of State said it, Liz Truss has said it as well. The very fact that the government have come to the conclusion that we would be within our rights to trigger the provisions of Article 16 of the protocol, and we said that as far back, I think, as last July, the fact that we have chosen not to do that, we hope is taken as an act of good faith for our determination to engage in finding practical solutions to the protocol to the benefit of Northern Ireland, Ireland and the United Kingdom as a whole. But it can't go on indefinitely. We very much hoped it wouldn't sort of bleed into the election period. But we've got to accept the reality. When such a large proportion of the population of Northern Ireland do not think the protocol is a good thing for their identity, their belonging, their nationhood, that is a problem. And we've got to address it, we've got to respect that. Northern Ireland thrives best when we can find ways of getting cross-community support for things. Karen, on the very technical point you asked me, I'm absolutely aware and alive to this. A number of businesses have raised that over the course of the time that I've been back in Northern Ireland. We are taking that up with Treasury colleagues and also HMRC, who are looking at it very closely. It's quite complicated, as you will well know from your own time in Northern Ireland, but we are over it and we are engaging with colleagues across government on it.
Thank you very much, Minister. Senator Emer Curry.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Minister, I'm conscious that we are in the shadow of Westminster Hall, the oldest building on the parliamentary estate, around which the institutions of the state have grown, like the law courts. And my thoughts turn to the rule of law, the command paper on legacy, and the victims who are opposed to that command paper, and particularly the statute of limitations, which not just try to end legacy criminal prosecutions, but also criminal investigations, inquests, civil actions, now and in the future. And this is a lockdown on the rule of law, and it suppresses truth, justice, accountability and acknowledgement. And so, in your words today, you acknowledge that there is work to be done. You acknowledge that there is unfinished business. So how can we draw the line under the past and under legacy? So I ask you today, Minister, will you scrap your proposals for a statute of limitations and listen to victims and what they want?
Thank you very much, Emer. Steve Aiken, MLA. Steve.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank the Minister for his remarks. I don't want to turn this into a meeting of the Northern Ireland Assembly, and I'm not going to send you an invitation to join the Ulster Unionist Party either. But my question is quite technical. You will be aware, Minister, of the issues we're now having with the EU anti-dumping legislation in Northern Ireland, where Northern Ireland companies, particularly manufacturing companies, are now finding it very difficult to get the necessary fasteners, materials and the rest of they need from the rest of our nation to do that. Can the Minister look urgently at how we're going to resolve this particular issue about anti-dumping legislation, but it's now having a real significant impact on much of our manufacturing sector?
Thank you very much, Steve. Minister Burns.
So thank you. I think from the passion with which you spoke and the response from some participants here, you underlie how emotive and sensitive all of this is. And I have to say that some of the most difficult and emotionally charged meetings that I've had in the time that I've been back in Northern Ireland have been with victims groups and victims themselves. I had a number of those meetings earlier this year. The command paper, as you say, was published last July. That predated my returning to government. And we committed at the time the Secretary of State brought forward the command paper to listen, to consult widely on the content of the command paper. And that process has been ongoing, and it has been genuine. I give you my assurance on that. I, for what it's worth, personally don't like the terms drawing lines and moving on. Because the reality is that the hurt and the harm and the damage done to individuals, to families and to communities is enduring. There has to be a way of trying to move forward and accept the past, but not to forget it, not to try and diminish the real hurt and harm done. But I think we also have to be honest with ourselves that the likelihood of successful criminal prosecution is diminishing with each passing month and year. And the command paper sought to see if there was a way to put new mechanisms in place that would put information recovery at the heart. We will come forward with revised proposals based on the consultations that have been undertaken and the views that have been brought forward. I'm slightly constrained. You will understand this. This is being live streamed. I'm slightly constrained. I'll just sort of announce where we might be and how soon we might be doing that. But we have listened very carefully. We continue to refine the proposals, and they will be published in due course. And I'm sorry that's an inadequate answer, but that's as far as I can realistically go within the constraints that are imposed upon me. Steve, I know exactly what you're talking about as a former international trade minister who was partially responsible for the creation of the Trade Remedies Authority. It's an area that I understand relatively well. We are across it, we are looking at it, and any real live examples you have, please pass them on. It's the same with the protocol, by the way. It's really useful to have concrete examples of how processes are impeding or slowing the free flow of trade and the success of commerce in Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Minister. Colin McGrath, MLA. Colin.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister. I represent South Down, and so far through the whole of the protocol issues, I've had one business contact me having problems with getting vitamin D delivered into their business, and that has been it. And I wonder sometimes if the whole issue of the protocol is being amplified and blown out of proportion. But just like I've only heard from one business about the problems that they're having, I've also heard very little from the British government about what we can do to try and benefit from the protocol and try and help the businesses that are within my constituency to be able to develop any procedures that there might be as a result of the protocol. So what are you actively doing to try and help businesses benefit from that protocol, and what outreach are you doing with them? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. Senator Lorraine Clifford-Lee. Lorraine.
I have one very brief question for you, and that is, when will your government follow through on your commitment to Irish language rights in Northern Ireland and bring the Irish Language Act through Westminster?
Thank you, Lorraine. Minister?
So on the protocol, the biggest single thing we can do on the protocol to help businesses is to bring certainty to what will be the enduring trading relationship and Northern Ireland's place within that framework, and that is what the government is trying to do. This really would have been better to be, I guess, answered by James, but I mean, one of the things that I try to do in Northern Ireland is as I've just alluded to Steve, is to find actual examples that we can talk to our European friends about and say that this is what's actually happening, and really is this what we intended when we signed an agreement to try and protect the European Union single market, which, by the way, I do not for one moment resile from the fact that that is a legitimate thing for the European Union and the Irish Republic to be concerned about. Of course it is. But I accept it as truth because you say so, that you've only been contacted by one. I've got one example here of a business in Kent, a cheese supplier, who has decided to stop supplying their cheeses to Northern Ireland because of the export health certificate and the veterinary sign-off certificate. There's another one here, a branded goods producer in Hull, who've decided they will no longer supply to the EU, which they have decided includes Northern Ireland. There's another one here, a company in Newcastle under Lyne, who supply, or did supply, organic products to Northern Ireland, and they again have also decided to remove all their own brand products for sale in Northern Ireland. There's a company here, I won't give you its name, that would be inappropriate, but they supply electrical equipment, kitchen electrical equipment, or they used to Northern Ireland. They've now decided that, for example, to bring a kitchen fryer in from GB to NI, there's going to be an additional £12 plus VAT charge on the delivery. These are very real examples affecting consumers and businesses in Northern Ireland. And I think, applying my reasonable person test, I don't think people could say reasonably those were things that we thought we were signing up to in an arrangement to protect the EU single market. So we have to carry on those discussions. And sorry, yes, now the question on, I'm tempted to answer the question about when we're going to bring in an Irish Language Act, with the very honest answer that we have absolutely no intention of bringing in an Irish Language Act. We are going to bring forward legislation on a cultural package that will also recognise the traditions of the Loyalist Protestant Unionist communities. These were agreements that were signed up to under New Decade, New Approach. They were commitments that the Executive then said they would take forward through the Assembly. The Secretary of State gave a commitment that were those not taken forward through the Assembly, we would legislate here in Westminster, and that remains our intention. And the Secretary of State, I think, again, as recently as last week or perhaps the week before, reaffirmed that it is still his intention that we do that within the existing mandate. So, and I can see you're tempting me to put a date on it. Within the existing mandate clearly means not very far away. But with all these things, I will only commit to a date when I see it printed on the audit paper.
Thank you very much, Minister. Okay, Lorraine. Eamon O'Keefe, TD, did you indicate? No. Are there any other members? We've just a few minutes because we started that a little bit early. Any other member with a quick question for Minister Burns?
The 11 o'clock was a limit, not a target, so don't feel
obliged. Annabel Ewing.
Thank you.
MSP.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up perhaps on a conversation that I was having with the Minister at dinner last night on the issue of refugees fleeing the Ukraine. And I just wonder, in light of some perhaps more positive indications we're seeing this morning, Minister, whether you feel that we will get to the position that the EU has adopted, which is to allow all those fleeing Ukraine to come in without visa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annabel. Minister?
So we had quite a feisty exchange on some of those matters and other matters last night. I indicated to you last night, although I couldn't tell you, that there would be movement overnight. There has been some announcements made overnight by the government in terms of entry into the UK for those who are connected to British nationals in Ukraine. It's a very fast-moving situation, and I think it's unlikely that the position we're at this moment will be the final point that we we get to. But I cannot, you have to understand this, I cannot commit the government to a future policy when those conversations are still ongoing.
Thank you, Minister. Lord Dobbs.
Thank you. I wonder if I might just pursue the point about refugees, because the Irish government announced immediately when the crisis, the refugee situation emerged, the Irish government announced immediately that they were going to take some people, that they were going to open their doors to Ukrainians. And although I don't like to use this as an occasion for having an argument, which we're going to have in the Lords this afternoon and the next few days, I think it's disappointing that we and the Irish government are going in different directions on this. I hope we can pull it back and go in the same direction as the Irish and show a humanitarian approach to the situation for refugees. It's a tragedy, and as Europeans, we should share in dealing with it.
Thank you very much, Lord Dobbs, and I think all of us admire the great work you have done over the years and the powerful advocacy you have given in regard to these immigration matters over the years. Do you want to make a comment, Minister?
I echo what you just said to Alf, who has acted as an unsettler of the conscience of the British body politic on these matters over many years. Those conversations are ongoing across government. What I would say, however, and I think more announcements will be made in due course, but I have to say I'm actually quite proud of the role that the United Kingdom government is playing over Ukraine in terms of trying to shape an international response to Russia, to try and bring some colleague governments in Europe who were perhaps slightly more reluctant to ejecting Russia from SWIFT, applying very heavy sanctions against those connected to the Putin regime. We will be legislating for some of that tomorrow. I will leave here in an hour or so to go to PBL to talk through and hopefully sign off the draft bill that we'll bring to Parliament tomorrow on sanctions. I think the UK has been in the vanguard of shaping global opinion in response to the absolutely appalling, unprovoked, unconscionable attack against an innocent people by effectively a dictator, and I'm proud of that. But I say, on the refugee thing, I think there will be further announcements in due course.
And thank you, Minister. The final question to our Vice Chair, Karen Smith MP. Karen.
We have a chance to do an extra bit of grilling and pudding, so we're really grateful for your time, Conor. But just finish on really that there is an issue that unites us all, that we're all facing exactly the same problem, which we should be able to deal with together, and that is around health services and the recovery, particularly from the pandemic. And as colleagues here know, the waiting lists in Northern Ireland before the pandemic were an absolute disgrace, even compared to, if I my political point, there were 4.4 million here in the United Kingdom. I mean, they were triple that proportionally in Northern Ireland. I know Reg MP and I talked about this a lot of times, doing some great work in the Lords. And for various reasons, reforms haven't happened in Northern Ireland, and we all know that history. But in terms of migration, making the protocol work, our place across the islands, the common travel area, how we all move around the place, it surely should be at the top of our agendas now in your conversations when you go to meet, have your lovely dinner in Beath with Thomas, etc. That health services, recruitment of people to be able to manage that. There is a problem with specialisms across the islands. We don't have the people to be able to cope with the health and care system of the future. None of us. So it's absolutely incumbent that all parts of this jurisdiction do have a much better focus, and I think we need to make that at top level of all governments as well on the things that we need to resolve, because that will indeed bring prosperity to us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Minister,
I think that's an absolutely brilliant question on which to end, because it goes to the very heart of everything that the relationship between the governments of these islands is all about. And as I said earlier, when relations between London and Dublin are close and strong and involved and courteous, that is to the benefit of all our citizens throughout these islands. And I think we have to come to, in a sense, we've got to try and move beyond the divisions that were caused by Brexit, where the Irish government totally understandably thought that the decision that the United Kingdom took was damaging to their national interest and sought very strongly to defend their national interest during the negotiations, and we sought to do what we believed was advancing our national interest. We've got to find a way now to acknowledge the difficulties, the misunderstandings of that period, and try and find a new recommitment to a post-Brexit relationship that is obviously different to the pre-Brexit relationship. I'm passionately committed to that. You know, I have, in a very real sense, skin in the game. I've got family dotted all over the island of Ireland, many of whom, by the way, are actually appalled that I'm back in Northern Ireland as a British government minister. Many of them would have alliances that would not exactly be Tory in inclination. But I'm very committed to it. The health service is a really difficult situation, difficult situation at Northern Ireland. I think we would find it very hard to justify to our constituents if the situation was replicated in our constituencies in England. As a UK government minister, in a UK government department, we're very constrained because it's devolved. There are no real levers that we can pull. We've sought to help by requesting that the MOD supply some army and other medical reservists into Northern Ireland to help, but it's in a very perilous state. And I think I would say, and it would probably be my sort of concluding message, and if I wanted one message to be taken away on behalf of the UK government, I suspect it's a message that would be echoed and shared by the Irish government. This is why we want there to be a return to stable power sharing in Northern Ireland. This is what the people of Northern Ireland want their government in Northern Ireland to be focusing on. This is very real to people's lives who are waiting for appointments and waiting a very long time for appointments, and that's why it's vital that we get those power sharing institutions up and running after the elections, and why I want to see everyone committing to return to power sharing post-May. The fact that we haven't been able to pass the three-year budget in Northern Ireland has already had an impact on health resourcing because the extra that would have gone in required that budget to be passed. So, you know, this isn't theoretical. This is already impacting on people's day-to-day lives in Northern Ireland. So I just want a full-throttled, open commitment on the part of all the parties that they will be back around the table working in the interests of the people of Northern Ireland after those elections in May.
Thank you very much, Minister. Could I thank colleagues? We have spot on time in regard to the completion of this session. Thank our colleagues for the variety of questions, and also to thank Minister Byrne for his comprehensive address at the outset of this session, and also for his engagement with a great variety of questions. So thank you very much, Minister Byrne.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm conscious that there's been no chance to use the facilities and grab a coffee, so we've decided just to give you a few minutes, literally a few minutes, to pop out and come back. The coffees and teas are in the Jubilee room to the right, and the lavatories are downstairs. There's one up here, but there are several downstairs, which will be more convenient for people. But please, could you be back here in 5 or 6 minutes? So just a very short break. Thank you very much.
1979, just a quick look.
I think we've got to give them some kind of...
Both would be. company used to call me Thomas Byrne. Yeah, that'd be typical in Calvin too. Oh yeah, got me good too. And down our way now. But then up at me, there's Byrne. Is that right? Yeah. Byrne. Byrne. B-E. There's a few of them down there. No, Mickey Byrne.
What time is Keir Starmer coming on? I think we'll get going, yeah? There's a few still coming, yeah.
Should have brought my fork and my glass from last night.
Order. If I could ask everyone to take their seats, please. Thank you very much. We're going to reconvene the Assembly, and I'm delighted to welcome our next speaker, which is the Minister of State for European Affairs from Ireland, Minister Thomas Byrne, TD. Thomas, great welcome to you here in London. Thank you for joining our Assembly this week, and we invite you to address the Assembly this morning. Thank you very much.
Gurmagat Andrew, Gurmagat Brendan, thank you both very much for your welcome last night and today. And to thank everybody here today, ambassadors, Minister Burns, other distinguished guests. It's a great honour to be here at this plenary session. I'm also glad to be here in person. I think we're all probably zoomed out at this stage. I think it's the first time that BIPA has gathered in this way, I think in almost 3 years. So prior to starting, I'd like to recognise the terrible events currently happening in Ukraine. Our thoughts, our prayers and our practical support are with the people of Ukraine at this moment. Ireland strongly condemns the unjustified and unprovoked attack by Russia on Ukraine and on innocent communities in Ukraine, and we stand with the people of Ukraine. As we come today here as parliamentarians, I also want to recall Sir David Amess. I didn't know him personally, but it's clear from his reputation and from what everybody said about him that he was an outstanding public representative. The attack on David Amess was deeply felt by his family, his constituents, but it was deeply felt by all of us as public representatives. Our Taoiseach said it was an attack on democracy, which indeed it was, and we held a minute's silence in Dáil Éireann last year. Today and every day, our memory of David Amess should inspire us to sharpen our commitment to democracy, to public service and to our constituents. I also want to acknowledge as well the death recently of Christopher Stalford. The last in-person engagement that I had on Northern Ireland issues was actually, I think, November or October last year, and Christopher was on the panel with me. And I want to give my deepest sympathies to his family and his party colleagues and his community as well, to which he was so deeply committed to as well. He was an outstanding public representative, and I thought the comment that struck me about him was a lot of people said he was born for politics, and that was certainly clear, and born for public service and service to his community. Here in the Palace of Westminster, I'm very conscious of many Irish men and women who have entered this building as representatives back in history, of course, and who are passionate advocates for their communities and their islands in these halls. And indeed, as a Chocolate Dáil, a TD from Meath, I might be forgiven for particularly mentioning a number of my, I might call them predecessors. They were certainly elected by, I suppose at that time, some of the people of Meath. Women didn't have the vote, and lots of men didn't either. But Charles Stewart Parnell sat for Meath, and his fate as leader of the Irish Parliamentary Party, the Home Rule Party, was decided only a few hundred yards from here in Committee Room 15, which is often spoken of as a pivotal moment in Irish history. And the controversial impact of that was felt for decades to come in Irish history. Daniel O'Connell and Michael Davitt also represented Meath as members of Parliament too. And we've just finished marking the 100th anniversary of treaty negotiations, culminating in the signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty and the establishment of the Irish Free State. We're reminded of history, that history has various interpretations and different consequences for different communities, and I think makes it incumbent on us all to try and understand everybody else's history. So we look at the negotiators on the treaty, I think very near me of the Battle of the Boyne, for example, that is certainly very important to the unionist community, different consequences in other communities. I look at Cromwell outside, not somebody who's venerated in my hometown of Drogheda, quite frankly, but clearly there are different views in Britain as well. So I think it's important that we acknowledge all of those aspects of our shared history that is not always interpreted in the same way, or certainly remembered in the same way. But that understanding has to be there. So today it's challenging indeed to imagine the fateful issues 100 years ago and decisions that figures such as Griffith, Collins, Lloyd George, Churchill struggled with. How heavily the burdens of history and expectation must have weighed on them during those crucial weeks. In comparison, the issues which we reflect on today, while definitely difficult, they seem to me to be more manageable, certainly between Ireland and Britain and the European Union. So we have come a long way. We have so much more to build on, but a lot of work to do, I think, to understand each other as well. So strengthened by that shared history, I will first address the aftermath of Brexit and current key issues in EU-UK relations before considering the continuing importance of British-Irish relations and our ambition for continuing to develop them. Brexit, as has happened now, it's happened, there's no discussion, it has happened, but it has altered the EU-UK relationship and has altered and has profound implications for the island of Ireland. I think we all know that. We still have important choices to make in terms of our vision for future EU and UK cooperation. For Ireland, let's be clear, ensuring that this new relationship safeguards the Good Friday Agreement and benefits people and business and jobs in Northern Ireland, that remains a core consideration. The potential for profound disruption in Northern Ireland arising from the UK's decision to leave the EU has been clear since day one. Northern Ireland's unique circumstances require and have got unique arrangements. So we can't lose sight of why the protocol was signed in the first place. It was designed on the basis of respecting two referendum outcomes, the referendums on the island of Ireland on the 22nd of May 1998 that endorsed the Good Friday Agreement, and indeed the UK-wide Brexit referendum. The protocol was a compromise that was agreed when other options were removed from the negotiating table. And it is the agreed means by which the gains of the peace process are maintained and the negative impacts of Brexit on Northern Ireland are minimised to the greatest extent possible. It is the agreed compromise which fully respects, acknowledges and caters for the unique circumstances of Northern Ireland. The European Commission has engaged consistently and extensively with stakeholders in Northern Ireland, as has the Irish Government. Vice President Šefčovič has regularly met with political leaders, business and representatives from civic society to understand their concerns. And let me be clear as well. Vice President Šefčovič or any of my European colleagues, not one of them has ever mentioned to me the constitutional issues in Northern Ireland. They keep their focus entirely directed on what is in front of them, and that is the protocol between the European Union and the United Kingdom, which acknowledges that the Good Friday Agreement is there and the constitutional protections that are in the Good Friday Agreement. The constitutional question is an issue for the people of Northern Ireland. It is not an issue for my European colleagues, and they've made that clear time and time again. So when they're looking at this, it is purely from the point of view of the protocol and that agreement that has been reached to protect peace in Northern Ireland and to protect the single market of the European Union. So the ambitious proposals published by the European Commission in October are a direct result of listening to those most impacted. They clearly address practical, genuine issues that matter most to people in Northern Ireland. Where implementation challenges have been identified, and rightly identified, the EU has proposed creative, credible and durable solutions. This is a concrete demonstration of the EU's commitments to the people of Northern Ireland. And let's be clear, it's not just about business. We had headlines about worries about medicines, and I was very clear, as were all of my colleagues, that there would be no issue with medicines. And we've seen a clear follow-through on that commitment. And the EU is proposing to give greater voice and visibility for Northern Ireland in the implementation of the protocol. We want the protocol to work well. We want to see the real opportunities it presents fully realised. And heard what MLA John O'Dowd said earlier about companies in his constituency expanding, and that never happened before. And we've seen so many examples. The nearest one to me is Norbrook and Newry, just up the road. Many of you would have known the founder, Eddie Haughey, his daughter Caroline, in university with me. They've said this is a game changer. Wright Bus in Ballymena as well, Newprint in Derry. Almac as well, I think that's probably the company you were referring to, John, in your constituency. I think over 1,000 jobs, if I recall. Absolutely unprecedented investment. We were talking about this time last year in terms of the best of both worlds, and people, oh, don't talk about that, it's too theoretical. But actually, we're now seeing this in practice. And I've been telling my European colleagues where there have been some issues with maybe some lack of understanding of the protocol in far reaches of the European Union. We've gone to every government and said, look, will you please let your businesses know the exact position in Northern Ireland, that it's part of the single market, that it's part of the customs territory of the UK as well, and get to know that they can trade with Northern Ireland, they can invest in Northern Ireland. There's been follow through on that. And that's the piece of the story that I think needs greater focus on and promotion on this side of the Irish Sea as well. There's real benefits for Northern Ireland. That dual access is so important. Northern Ireland is a unique place to invest. Foreign direct investment in Northern Ireland is now at historically high levels. And I would say in terms of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, over many years, foreign direct investment is one of the key things that has brought about economic success, and we want that success into all communities in Northern Ireland. So I think the protocol can deliver on the prosperity agenda for the people of Northern Ireland, and that should be our focus. And all of the people in Northern Ireland need to be and will be continued to be heard. The EU can't resolve all the issues. It did, after all, take two sides to agree to the terms of the protocol in the first place. Sustainable progress can only be made together in a spirit of partnership and trust. The package that the Commission proposed provides a pathway to resolve outstanding issues. But Britain needs to be clear that it's willing and ready to work together with the European Union. And I do acknowledge the change of atmosphere in recent months, but there's still a long road to go. And there is an opportunity before us to reach an agreement on the protocol, and I can believe then we can move into a more positive phase as partner. I have no doubt that a constructive future partnership is in everybody's interest. Every community in Northern Ireland has a strong interest in the British and Irish government working together, being on the same page. And that doesn't affect anybody's aspirations, which are entirely a separate matter from the day-to-day progressing of communities and the economy in Northern Ireland. Ireland wants a very strong relationship with the UK, as does the EU, for the benefit of all of our peoples. The EU may no longer be a fellow European Union member. The UK may no longer be a fellow EU member state, but the EU and the UK, of course, share values of democracy, of the rule of law, of a free media, exactly what the people in Ukraine are looking for. So, whether it be post-COVID recovery, climate change, or peace and security, there are global challenges that we're better placed to tackle when we work together. British-Irish bilateral relations. These relations now are built on firm foundations, and they've been difficult at many times. The most important part is the Good Friday Agreement. 24 years ago, I certainly remember it extremely clearly, it was the fruition of long years of hard work and creativity and compromise on all sides. And let us remember that this agreement, which is rightly, by the way, held up as an example all across the world, people always talk about it to us, it was the result of compromise and working together between governments and indeed between the political parties in Northern Ireland as well. It marked the beginning of a new process of peace building and reconciliation, and the difficult task of delivering on ambitious social and economic goals jointly agreed. It hasn't always been easy. Peace is slow and frustrating, lots of challenges, setbacks, disappointments, but governments and political parties continue to persevere, and it is delivering. Political parties are preparing for an election in the Assembly. Wish them all the best of luck. It's not for us to get involved there, and the period ahead will likely bring new challenges. Our focus now will be on working with the political parties in the British government to support political stability and certainty into the future, no matter what the outcome. We know what is possible when the political parties and the two governments work together, when we sit down at a table in a spirit of inclusion and compromise, and in the knowledge of what the people of Northern Ireland have already achieved. People don't want cliff edges, they don't want instability, but I think everybody, it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in Dublin, Belfast or London, you want a system that delivers on the issues that matter most to you as a citizen. So there are always periods of challenge, but they shouldn't obscure what's been achieved by the Good Friday Agreement. The whole generation has grown up not knowing about soldiers walking the streets, no experience of that. There's an ethos of justice, and nothing's perfect. I'm not going to say everything's perfect, but there is an ethos of justice, equality and tolerance that wasn't there in the past, and there's more work to be done, and it's a foundation for achieving a lot more. The choices that we make today will define the future for many generations. The government, led by Taoiseach Micheál Martin, is working to engage with all communities and traditions on the island through the Shared Island Agenda, Shared Island Unit, which is in the department of the Taoiseach. We want to build consensus around a shared future, but underpinned by the Good Friday Agreement and underpinned by a practical approach to working together on many of the issues that matter to us, such as transport, tourism, health, education, whatever it is, where we can both benefit. Other aspects of the foundations of our bilateral relations remain strong. Our two governments have taken important steps to protect the common travel area. The common travel area will continue, of course, and allows Irish and British citizens to move freely to live, work and study in both jurisdictions, while benefiting from access to healthcare, education, social protection, housing and the right to vote in some elections. And I do acknowledge, though, Senator O'Donnell and some others mentioned the issues that you mentioned in terms of the proposed legislation, and the Irish Government is fully engaged on that, and indeed I'll be having some meetings myself later on with other counterparts on that, and acknowledge what that has been acknowledged as well by British ministers. So let's hope we can all work together on that, and I think it's a well-made point that we are continuing to work on. So Ireland's ambition for the post-Brexit era is to strengthen British-Irish relations by building on our strong foundations. I believe we've clearly demonstrated our intent in this regard. We have supported enhanced use of the Good Friday Agreement's East-West bodies. The British-Irish Council Summit, which met last in Cardiff in November. I wasn't there because I was at the Somme that day, at the very solemn commemoration, and the British-Irish Governmental Conference in December. They facilitated substantive engagement and started to build for the future. We've upgraded relationships and our footprint across Great Britain. In October, Simon Coveney opened the new Consulate General for the North of England in Manchester and reopened our consulate in Cardiff, and he participated in the Ireland-Wales Forum. We also signed new strategic cooperation frameworks with Scotland and Wales, and these partnerships are really important to us. Political contexts are strong. Minister Coveney met Foreign Secretary Truss in Munich. Indeed, I met Foreign Secretary Truss at the OSCE ministerial meeting in December, which I have to say was the thing that switched me on fully to the prospect of an invasion of Ukraine, because the worry and concern that was there that day with those foreign ministers was certainly of considerable concern to me. My colleague Michael McGrath was here last week in London too. Ireland and the UK have cooperated very strongly at the UN Security Council. We appreciated the UK's successful chairing of COP26, and we've obviously been very supportive and working together this week on issues surrounding Ukraine. I'm very proud of our diplomats and indeed British diplomats on this issue at the Security Council. It's very, very difficult. We had good cooperation last year as well, as we attempted to put climate and the impact of climate on our security situation on the agenda of the Security Council. Unfortunately, a Russian veto stalled us then as well, but there was very good cooperation between Ireland and Britain and the other members of the Security Council on that. We will look forward to new ways in which we can do more together on the major challenges that we face. There's clearly great potential for bilateral contact, but I think the figure is 50. There were 54 bilateral contacts last year. Now, I think that needs to be more greater, but it's still very, very significant. The Taoiseach, Minister for Finance, and Minister Sean Fleming, who's also Senior Minister of State in that he's in the Department of Finance, they'll all be here in Great Britain for St Patrick's Day programme during that week, with a strong business and community dimension and bilateral visits as well to ministers and colleagues. And we remain determined to make the most of the large and mutually beneficial commercial relationship. Even last year, which was a tough year trade-wise, two-way goods and services was worth €90 billion. It's really, really important. And you know, we talk about the protocol and trade flows have changed, no question about that. And free ports were mentioned and all that, but Belfast Port has had a record year as well. So there's been huge success there too since the protocol. Our community and family ties are equally important. I mean, how many Irish people travelled over yesterday to watch the match, the big game? You know, I mean, a huge amount. Certainly that I knew. Mainly long-term Liverpool fans, I would think, and certainly my neighbours were going. But that's the connections, the ties that bind, and people have always followed English soccer, and I think that's and other cultural institutions. Coronation Street, EastEnders, they're on the televisions every night in Ireland too. I think we all know that. And Irish people then in return have made a distinctive, creative contribution to virtually every aspect of Irish society. Millions of people in Britain have some level of Irish heritage, possibly as many as 25%, 1 in 4 people. Irish community organisations right across Great Britain have played a huge role in helping people through the pandemic, with over 14,000 Irish employed in the NHS. In fact, my wife trained as a nurse in the NHS, and indeed played for London at county level football. So again, the different connections that we all have. And sport continues to bind us together in a special way. Liverpool last night, of course, I didn't manage to see the match in my travels, etc. But of course, it was a young Irish man was key to Liverpool's win last night. And I think there were 23 Irish-trained horses at the Cheltenham Festival that won last year, and we want to see an outcome again. I'm not the most regular visit to Cheltenham, but I can tell you that the ties between my county of Meath and Britain in terms of horses is extremely important. So at every aspect of society, we've really, really strong links. Look at the bid for the Euros in 2028. I hope this goes ahead, and I know ministers will be meeting soon to discuss that. I think there's huge potential for that. So there's a huge amount of activity jointly. You don't need me to tell you, but it's important that we keep amplifying that ourselves. Because a lot of it's very easy for bad news to spread, but sometimes it's more difficult for the good news to spread. So in the next month, the Metro mayors from Manchester and Liverpool are visiting Dublin to further enhance commercial relationship and cultural links between Ireland and the north of England. And indeed, the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall are coming to visit Ireland as well, sometime in March, I believe, and indeed there will be other visits too around that time as well. So as we look back at the last 100 years, at the intertwined nature of the history of these islands and how much we've endured and experienced together, it's evident that relations ebb and flow, as is the nature of these things, but in general, we're in a more positive and, I would say, mutually respectful phase. The potential of these relations can only be fully realised if we can overcome our current challenges, in particular in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol and the outworkings of Brexit. But I think these issues can be resolved, but it needs partnership, flexibility and goodwill. We've done it before and can do it again, but current challenges should not blind us to all that's positive in relations between our two countries. This very Assembly and our conversation, our encounter here today, in its 32 years of existence, started off in a very troubling phase of the Troubles, but as the seeds of peace were starting to germinate, and this Assembly undoubtedly was part of that in terms of bringing people together, I think that's living proof of how relations have improved dramatically. So, Gurmila Mahler.
So, thank you, Minister Byrne, for your remarks. We now have questions from the floor. So, if people could indicate to me, please, early, if you'd like to say something, if you have any questions. The first two to be called are Victor Boyan, TD, and then Steve Aiken, MLA. Victor.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose, firstly, I just would like to touch on something that my Shannon colleague, Emer Curry, talked about, was the legacy issue. And it's something that you didn't touch on, Minister, here today. And it's something, talking last night to many of my colleagues right across this Assembly, we discussed. And it was interesting, the common ground, which, again, that's the benefit of the Assembly. And the Assembly haven't really taken a strong call on it. But the reality is that unilateral decisions, unilateral conversations and announcements, they're destabilising, they're undermining, they're subverting and weakening confidence and trust for the people of Northern Ireland. The people of Northern Ireland, which must be at all times the focus of our deliberations. So, in closing, Minister, I'd just like to ask that question, that you might just share briefly, very briefly, because time is under pressure, but the Taoiseach's concern and the Irish government's concern in relation to the proposed unilateral amnesty and in connection with the legacy issues of Northern Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much indeed, Thomas, for your remarks. I've got to be honest, I didn't recognise what you were referring to when you were talking about the European Union and its relationship with people in Northern Ireland. Speaking as somebody who is a party leader and met many times with European officials and indeed Irish government ministers, for a long time I was talked to, I wasn't listened to. The fundamental issue is around the Northern Ireland Protocol, because when the Northern Ireland Assembly came back, the implications of the protocol weren't known. The implications of the protocol are now known, and they are undermining the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We are in a situation now that unless something is done, there won't be a Northern Ireland Executive, there won't be a Northern Ireland Assembly, and we're going backwards. There needs to be a recognition between both the Irish Government and particularly the Europeans that this is the case. What is the Irish Government doing about making that perspective clear, rather than talking about things that, quite frankly, I don't actually recognise?
Minister.
Well, I'll just say, just on Victor's point, first on the issue of legacy, it's really, really important, and I absolutely knew it would come up in questions, so I didn't address it in my comments. Just to be very clear, statute of limitations is alien to our legal system, which we share by tradition with Britain as well. So statute of limitations, criminal actions, is not something that we are familiar with in our legal system, and it's not something that we could support. It will be a fundamental change in our legal system. So just in terms of the contacts that are there, and you asked about that, Minister Coveney is in direct contact with Secretary of State Lewis. I raised these issues as well with Minister Cleverly this morning. We fully agree that unilateral action is never good, but it's particularly bad in this case, and I was really taken by Minister Byrne's point that some of the meetings he's had with victims, and why wouldn't they be, are the most difficult meetings that he's had. And it brings intensified hardship for families, and then, you know, when we have to discuss these issues, then it makes reconciliation more broadly more difficult as well, if there's a doubt about this. The Taoiseach was in touch with the Prime Minister before Christmas as well about legacy issues, just on his role, as you asked that. So we need to see, in our view, a significant change in direction at political level to be able to find a collective and positive way forward. So that's a significant change of direction by the British Government. We'll play our part to find the basis to move forward, but it has to be consistent with international human rights obligations and previous agreements as well, and we've been very, very clear to the British Government about that as well. Now, what I'd say to Steve Aiken, and thanks very much for saying that, and I absolutely understand unionist concerns with the protocol. But I'd say first, those companies that I listed, and there are more of them, that's reality. They are saying that.
Yes, well, I can give you exactly.
Yeah, I know. So I want to make that point, because this time last year that was theoretical. In fact, the advice was, oh, don't mention that unless it happens. It has started to happen. So, as I said in my remarks, the European Union, the Irish Government, I heard Sinn Féin MLA say everybody recognises unionist concerns. So that's why Sefcovic and co went to Northern Ireland to listen particularly to business. What are your problems with the protocol? How can we resolve these? I think the European Union put forward a massive package there to solve almost all of the issues, that the vast majority of issues that people have. And I understand them. People feel disconnected. The disconnection, though, I have to say this, was Brexit. That's the disconnection. And I mean, people in Northern Ireland didn't vote for Brexit. The majority wanted to stay. So, and Good Friday Agreement is a compromise. The protocol is a compromise. So not everybody's going to get what they want out of it. I mean, Northern Ireland is a single market for goods. It won't be in any single market for services. It's not part of. There are lots of other EU complications that Northern Ireland won't be able to, will affect Northern Ireland. We already see on the common travel area mentioned as well, in terms of just those little differences there that wouldn't have applied, would have profound impacts for people that wouldn't have applied within the EU. So it's a compromise, and it's not perfect. It's not, I'm sure, if there are people here, rather it was all UK was in the single market, and maybe in the customs territory of the EU, and that would have resolved pretty much all those issues. So what I'd say is, from our side, and it's the EU side, we want to make sure that the burden for business and the burden for people is as low as possible, while making sure that the single market for goods in the EU is protected, and remembering that that single market for goods in the EU is a huge advantage in Northern Ireland. A huge advantage. And I grasp that advantage. Grasp it. And we on the EU, Irish side, will make sure in the discussions that are taking place with the British Government that our proposals have gone very far, and we want to see them implemented, which I think could remove a huge part of the burden from business and citizens. And politicians, and I'm an elected politician myself, sometimes are our ratings, our approval ratings aren't very high. Public opinion ebbs and flows. But in Northern Ireland, the voice of business has been extremely well trusted by the people of Northern Ireland. When I hear business people in Northern Ireland, I never know what way they vote, what's their position on the constitutional question, but I know that they seem, from what they say, to have the best interests of, it seems to me, all of the people of Northern Ireland at heart. And I think the people in Northern Ireland have seen that as well and heard that as well and trust them. And they just want a better future. And the constitutional questions, I'm telling you, are utterly separate from anything the European Union has done. I've met Maroš Šefčovič, I know how many times. He sits every month at the General Affairs Council with me. He has never mentioned unionism or nationalism or United Ireland or United... It just doesn't come up. And that's the same for all of my European counterparts. That's a matter for the people of Northern Ireland. We have to be very clear about that. The European Union does not want to get involved in any constitutional questions. The protocol is built on the Good Friday Agreement, which itself is built on the principle of consent. And the European Union is coming to the table as an honest broker, somebody that has, with the British and Irish governments over the years, been of immense support to the peace process and continues to give that support through the Peace Plus programme, which is, I'm really pleased to say, is a joint effort between the Irish government, the British government and the European Union, which is going to help support Northern Ireland and border counties in the Republic as well. And that's another example of cooperation which is trilateral as well. So we're trying to make sure that the concerns that you have raised, and they're genuine and many people have raised, are addressed, but that the position of Northern Ireland within the single market is protected, that the peace process is protected, and that single market itself is protected too, because it's so valuable, I believe, to all of us. So that's a long answer, but we're doing this from a bona fide point of view, genuinely to make up for really the hammer blow that was Brexit in terms of Northern Ireland. But that's happened, and now we just have to work with what we have. And I do acknowledge the constructive approach that's taken place in the British government. The Joint Committee met last week for the first time in a long time, and I had very good engagement with James Cleverly this morning, and I know that that will continue between Liz Truss and Maroš Šefčovič, and I'm absolutely confident that this will lead to a better outcome and will not impact on the constitutional question. And people need to have confidence about that as well and go out and say Northern Ireland is going to do better. Northern Ireland is a place you can do business, and we've worked with the European Union to try and reduce the burden on some businesses that have result in relation to, particularly on the customs side and the animal and plant side as well. So, thanks.
Senator Neil O'Donoghue, next. Could I see an indication before I call Neil who else would like to put questions? So I've only got Neil on my list. Is anybody else itching to speak? Okay, Karen Bradley. Okay, thank you. Please, Neil, please proceed.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Who's got a mic at Ira as the Coralahar margin. I listened intently to Steve Egan's remarks because, as my colleague John O'Dowd said earlier, we are very conscious of unionist concerns, and I have to say, from my own perspective, I miss the voice of unionism in the Seanad. I think we have lost out as a result of not having that voice in this 26th Seanad. Minister, Steve spoke a lot about unionist concerns, but there are, of course, other concerns out there. There are the concerns of the majority that we were taken out of the EU against our will, that we have lost certain entitlements and rights, although I appreciate some have been protected, and that's welcome. Steve mentioned, he said that he could put equal amounts of figures to you. I don't know that he could point to thousands of job losses where there has been thousands of job creations as a result of the protocol. But one of the fundamental losses for us, Minister, has been the opportunity to have people elected to the European institutions on our behalf. The fundamental right of any citizen is to have the right to vote. I remain an EU citizen as an Irish citizen, but I am now denied the right to vote like tens of thousands of others. So I wonder, Minister, do you have any view on ensuring that the voice of everyone, all of the concerns right across the board, is heard and is heard effectively and is heard authentically from the community and from the various sectors in the north of Ireland going forward? Thank you.
Okay. Maurice Bradley, MLA.
Thank you, Minister. Before I ask a question, could I thank everybody for their kind remarks about my colleague Christopher Stalford. It has been a sad time for Christopher's young wife and young family, for the Assembly, but it's been keenly felt within our party as well. Minister, you made a fair speech there, but it was all based on the EU. We in Northern Ireland have a massive problem with the protocol, particularly within the unionist family. And it's not about job creation, it's about how it affects the consumer, the housewife, the builder who can't get his materials across because they've gone up in price or they've been withdrawn from the market to Northern Ireland. Minister, we are facing elections in May, and if there is to be continued devolved government in Northern Ireland, the protocol has to be solved before we go to the polls in May. And I would ask you, sir, to urge your government to do all that they can to ensure that those negotiations are concluded speedily before we go to the polls. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Canador O'Donnell, also in London, le gach in Yov. The point you made, I mean, look, it's a valid point, and I mean, it's unfortunately part of the outworkings of Brexit that what you see, and I think correctly as your right to be represented in the European Parliament and what the decisions have been taken, I think is important, and that has left a democratic deficit. I mean, I'll leave the discussions to the negotiations, but that is obviously an objective on our side, that there would be more representation. We have the joint committee that's there, and I think that is a useful forum, and once we get over these particular issues, I think that will continue to serve a purpose in talking about real concerns. Also, as well, and something that I've tried to get started, but the pandemic has probably not helped, and also the continuing uncertainty too. But I'm very keen that the presidency of the council, whoever that is at the time, would engage directly with Northern Ireland and Northern Ireland business, community groups, politicians. So it's not just the Commission, but the council, the member states, that would happen. I think it's very important, and I think some parties are doing this and others aren't. But it's very important to engage with other European parliamentarians in other countries. I met a Green MP in Germany who is now a minister, and she was incredibly well up to speed on the situation in Northern Ireland from her contacts with her Green colleagues in Northern Ireland. And part of that led directly to lines in the German government agreement, from what I can see anyway, it's my observation of it, in terms of commitment to Northern Ireland and to the protocol. So I'd certainly strongly encourage that type of engagement across, not just ourselves here, which is really crucial, but also across the European Union, and people getting their stories out there in every community. You know, it can't be. There's not one voice coming from Northern Ireland. There shouldn't be. It should be various voices, and we're extremely keen to have this agreed. Not just we wanted it done last year. You know, it's very much, I think, in everybody's interest that this is done as soon as possible. Look, the truth is, there's clearly issues with the protocol within the unionist community. There's clearly issues with Brexit in the majority of the community, certain nationalists and lots of unionists too. If we look at the results of the referendum, so it's all about compromise, and nobody is going to get everything they want. Good Friday Agreement didn't give everybody what they wanted, and this won't either. But it will be the best possible, if we can agree it, best possible solution for all of the people in Northern Ireland, and it shouldn't be seen as threatening. It should be seen as an opportunity. And you talk about the prices, and I know it's different circumstances, but I mean the arrangement. Like, I mean, we're in the Republic of Ireland, we're affected by the massive increase in bureaucracy now because of due to Brexit for imports from Britain. It's absolutely huge. Prices have gone up because of that. Brexit has caused that. And in Northern Ireland, we're trying to get, because of the different circumstances there, it's our objective, and I think the British government's objective, of course it is, to reduce that burden in Northern Ireland to the lowest extent possible while protecting the single market. And can I also make this point about the single market for goods of the European Union? Like, it's not some theoretical concept. It is designed to give consumers the best possible standards of goods that can be achieved. That's what the European Union has always tried to do. And the British government, I have no doubt, has similar objectives in terms of its goods, and that's why I think that we should be able to come to arrangements that protect everybody. And there's a lot of work going on. There is some progress being made, but quite frankly, we'd wish for a whole lot more progress.
Okay, thank you, Minister. John O'Dowd, MLA, then Lord Kilclooney.
Thank you, Chair, for your comments. As I said, this is my first meeting, and I'm wondering if colleagues from beyond the island of Ireland are maybe a wee bit frustrated at listening simply to the topic of the protocol and the challenges that are there. I suspect there's also some jealousy, to my previous remarks, in terms of thousands of jobs being created in my constituency, factories opening, expansion going on, and all those things. But I also temper my comments with what Niall has said. As a European citizen who carries an Irish passport, I have lesser rights than the minister sitting at the front, who also carries an Irish passport and is a European citizen. So we have had to compromise ourselves in relation to Brexit, in relation to the protocol. We've had to take a responsible position in relation to that. And sometimes in politics, it's not those who shout the loudest within your own ranks who are right. They're the ones you have to stand up to. And I think there's a challenge for that within political unionism. I'm not here to lecture anyone, because I know my unionist colleagues wouldn't take a lecture. But there's also a challenge for unionism to stand up to those within their ranks who are peddling myths and lies and who are using the protocol as a political objective to undermine the Assembly and the power-sharing institutions. Before Conor Byrne left, Minister Byrne left, he put out his challenge again. He wants all political parties to commit pre-May to power-sharing after the elections. Well, I can confirm here today, regardless of the outcome of that election, we will commit to power-sharing after the election. I think there's a challenge there for our unionist colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Okay. Lord Kilclooney.
To the Minister, when we negotiated the Belfast Agreement, the governments of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and of Ireland committed themselves in Article 1 that there could be no change in the status of Northern Ireland without consulting the people of Northern Ireland. Does the Republic of Ireland still honour that agreement? And secondly, I do think you are somewhat selective on the effect of the protocol on Northern Ireland. You mentioned various industries. The bottom line is an important one, and that is that trade from Northern Ireland to Great Britain has been reduced by 40% in the last year. And even my fellow colleague from County Armagh, O'Dowd, Sinn Féin, mentioned one or two industries that have been creating new jobs in his constituency in our county of Armagh. Once again, he was very selective. Tesco, Sainsbury's, many firms, 200 firms, have stopped sending exports from Britain to Northern Ireland. 200. And Sainsbury's has announced the closure in his constituency with a loss of 100 jobs last week, not mentioned.
Okay, order. Thank you, Lord Kilclooney. Minister.
Just in relation to what John O'Dowd said, we certainly encourage that as well. Obviously, we want to see the power sharing executive working no matter what the outcome of the elections are. And the one thing I certainly know, and the Germans know as well in the recent election, is you can't predict the result of any election months out from it. I mean, the SDP, Olaf Scholz, was so far behind in the polls it wasn't funny, and now he's the leader of Germany and one of the leaders of the free world. So I think I would give that lesson to all parties. My party has taken a lash from time to time as well, and we'll continue to go up and down. I think all of us will. So politics is never stays the same. But I really do repeat that point, that nobody gets everything they want. Nobody. In relation to what Lord Kilclooney said, the principle of consent is the foundation of our approach to Northern Ireland. The Good Friday Agreement is our approach to Northern Ireland. There's never been any doubt about that, and there will never be a doubt about that. But what I will say is that Brexit has unsettled business. It has unsettled trade. It has changed things. That's a reality. So again, with Brexit, there have been ebbs and flows. So when you look at some of the British supermarkets, I don't know, but I wonder, were they ready for Brexit? You look at Lidl, no issues whatsoever. None whatsoever in their supermarkets. We look at Spar and the Henderson Group, I think, of this massive expansion in Northern Ireland. And I have to say, on the Almac announcement, look, it was over 1,000 jobs. I mean, I was welcoming this. People were saying, why are we not getting these in Meath? It's a massive job announcement. I mean, constituency TD or MLA we'd be dancing on the streets if 1,000 jobs comes to your constituency, and that's what we want to see. And Deputy O'Dowd, or MLA O'Dowd mentioned that, and I think all of us should feel that. And I have recognised this. I have recognised that there are problems in the operation of the protocol. The European Union has recognised that, so your concerns have been recognised. So I'm not just here to tell one side of the story. I've told that because I think we need to amplify good news and encourage more to do the same. And we also recognise there are problems, and that's exactly why these talks and discussions are going on between Ireland and the EU, is to rectify and to deal with those concerns that you've mentioned. Many colleagues here have mentioned, and we'll do that in a constructive way, based on the Good Friday Agreement.
Okay. Minister, thank you very much for your speech and for answering questions today. We're delighted you've come to join our Assembly meeting here in London, and I think you've made many new friends. We look forward to continuing to work with you. So thank you very much for your attendance. We do have to... I hope you're staying for lunch and joining us for lunch. I hope you've got time to be with us.
I'll do my best. We have a lot
Great.
of engagements here today.
All right. And we'll be seeing you later on at the embassy, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. So we're now going to move on to the next session. I'm going to hand over to Brendan to chair the session with the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition. Brendan.
Thank you, Andrew. I am very pleased to call our next guest speaker, the Right Honourable Sir Keir Starmer, MP, Leader of Her Majesty's Official Opposition, to address our Assembly. Keir.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for inviting me to be here today. It's a privilege to join you for this 61st plenary session, and it's a real honour for me to be addressing you for the first time as leader of the Labour Party. It's a real privilege to be here to do that, and to be here in person to do that. We all know what a difference that makes. And I'm really proud that we've got Labour representatives here from the Senedd and from the Scottish Government as well. And I know it is the first time that you've got together in person, I think since 2019. I'd like to start, if I may, by just paying tribute on behalf of the Labour Party to Christopher Stolford, whose loss has been felt in the DUP family, but I think on all sides of the political aisle, and the tributes paid across both islands marked a life that was filled with public service. And I wrote to his wife and family expressing my condolences and hoping that the tributes across both sides will give her some comfort and the family some comfort in their loss. And of course we all remember Sir David Amess, a proud member of this group, tragically killed last year in the most appalling of circumstances. It feels that this important meeting of an assembly focused on bilateral cooperation couldn't be more appropriate as world events unfold. We are gathered here today against a dark sky as we see something we hoped would never see again, which is war in Europe. And I fear these dark days will get darker still, and I know that will be uppermost on the minds of so many people in this room. I do think that if we act now together with the swiftness, seriousness and unity that the situation demands, that we will, I hope, look back and say that this was the moment Putin sealed his own fate. Working together, we can bring about an end to this senseless loss of life in Ukraine and Putin's bandit regime. And from that, I hope we can emerge into the light stronger, more united, and I think for this morning's session, for today's session, with a renewed appreciation of the things that we hold dear. Because this week has brought home to us that the relationships we share and how we uphold them must never be taken for granted. It's given us pause to think about those relationships. And the relationship between Britain and Ireland is a profound one. It matters personally to me, and it matters to the Labour Party that I lead. It's also a relationship that matters deeply, of course, to the people across both of our islands. As the great John Hume once said, we are two neighbouring islands whose destiny is to live in amity and friendship with one another. And as we look around us today at events around the world, I think there's a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation for the peace that we share. And while we know there are challenges that we must meet, and you'll be discussing them today, and that we must not just meet them, we must overcome them, we also know today, of all days, that it's our privilege and our duty to work through them peacefully and together. Beyond our islands, the modern relationship that we share is an example of the promise of peace. That is something we should never ever take lightly. Because of the enormous sacrifices of those who delivered on this peace, we have a solemn duty to protect it and to uphold it. And we must never forget how it was forged and the compromises that were made to achieve it. Many of you will know that I spent some of the most important years in my career in Northern Ireland, working as a human rights advisor on the Northern Ireland Policing Board, an institution, of course, created by the Good Friday Agreement. In that decade, there was an indispensable partnership between the UK and Ireland as co-guarantors of the Good Friday Agreement. This pushed forward peace and it pushed forward progress. And that progress, I've often reflected, difficult and painstaking, could not have happened without the two governments standing side by side every step of the way. Every step of the peace process would have been harder, possibly impossible, without it. And we must always remember that. And in the new post-Brexit era, our relationship matters more importantly now than ever. As friends and partners, we have to be frank about the challenges and the difficulties that we now face. And whatever views people hold, few would deny that Brexit in the last 5 tumultuous years have been profoundly destabilising for Northern Ireland and the entire island of Ireland, placing a strain on our relationships. The importance of trust in Northern Ireland cannot be overstated. I was struck when I visited Northern Ireland just in July of last year at how low the levels of trust were. It's the biggest reflection I had as I left Northern Ireland. And that is dangerous and deeply concerning as a development because that trust matters more than anything. In my view, the instability over the protocol has gone on for far too long. Much of it stems from the government's deception about what it is. No change for business was never going to match the reality, and businesses, I think, knew that themselves. When it comes to the protocol, this Prime Minister negotiated it, ratified it, and legislated for it, and now he must make it work. And it would be a complete dereliction of duty to block pragmatic ways forward that will bring stability to jobs, trade, and livelihoods in Northern Ireland. And so, for example, over Christmas, it was possible to reach an accommodation over medicines. Slightly odd arrangement, with both sides making unilateral declarations compatible. But by Boris Johnson's standards, it was progress. And there's no reason why further, more functional progress can't be made in good time. But only if this government puts the interests of all in Northern Ireland first, and not a faction of their own party. We all know in this room that we can never allow acrimony and mistrust to become the norm in the political relationship between these islands. The stakes, frankly, are simply too high for that. The lessons of the last 25 years, I think, are clear. When the British-Irish relationship is strong and works well, progress and stability in Northern Ireland is much easier to achieve. Our relationship matters, and it matters deeply. It must be based on respect for each other as equals and as friends. Ireland shares our core values on the UN Security Council. They're our greatest friends, our nearest and largest trading bloc. Co-guarantees, not consultees, of the Good Friday Agreement and the progress that is yet to be made. Britain's interest does not lie in cutting ourselves off from our closest friends and partners, nor in provoking hostility with them. Labour believes Britain's national interest lies in a strong, close relationship with Ireland. We saw under the last Labour government just how much could be achieved. And in the years to come, the relationship between Britain and Ireland will remain such a vital and uniquely important one to me. Those who came before us made difficult choices and sacrifices to get to where we are. As we face challenging times, we must always be guided by the principles and the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement to help navigate our way. I am deeply concerned about the collapse of the Northern Ireland Executive, and I implore all parties to return to Stormont. This is a time for leadership. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom has a responsibility to use his position to try and broker progress. All of us in this room care about the importance and future of this relationship and will be involved in shaping it. So let's resolve to meet the difficulties we face, and let's resolve to do that together. The people of both islands expect us to, and they deserve no less. Together, out of the painful last few years, let's build a stronger future and be the example that the world needs of what it means to defend, value and cherish a legacy of peace. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sir Keir, for your comprehensive address covering so many issues, both bilateral relations and indeed our relations internationally as well, from both countries' point of view. Colin McGrath, MLA, has offered.
Thank you, Sir Keir, for your address. And I wanted to maybe reflect on one of the elements that you mentioned, which is, I mean, I didn't support Brexit, and I think the majority in the North didn't. But we have been left with the impact of it, some of which has been mentioned already today. But what is your assessment of the fact that between 2017 and 2020, we didn't have a voice here in Westminster, and we didn't have an assembly to be able to address many of the issues? And what warning does that suggest to certain parties that are still going to use the withdrawal from the Northern Ireland Executive and Assembly as a threat, and what would be the impacts of that?
Thank you very much, Colin. We're very limited time-wise. The Leader of the Opposition has other commitments. But I have a number of people offering to group all questions, and I'd ask for brief interventions, please. Pauline McNeill, MSP. Pauline.
Thank you. Thank you. Keir, it was great to have you in Scotland just a few weeks ago to talk to, I know, your comfortable territory, talking to lawyers and advocates. And we've had a lot of discussion in Scotland about legal reform. Now, one of the issues that's not been mentioned by anyone so far, and there's big issues facing our countries, the Ukraine crisis, post-Brexit. But I believe there is a crisis with violence against women. We know it's the first anniversary of Sarah Everard this week, in fact, and she's one of many women who have been murdered. Now, I believe that there is a crisis globally in the extent of violence against women in the Scottish courts. Nearly 70% of all the delays in the court proceedings are cases involving women and children. So I say it is a crisis, and I wondered, Keir, if you think that there's obvious common ground of all the parties here, and of course this Assembly is so important for these big issues, and I wondered if you shared that view, that there is something that at some future point we need to discuss how we can bind together and tackle what is an international global crisis of serious violence against women and girls.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Brendan Howland, TD. Brendan.
Thanks, Chair. Could I just ask, Keir, in relation to the Labour Party's view on the amnesty bill? I attended a meeting in Belfast City Hall, and I have to say in my political career it was the only meeting I attended where every single shade of political opinion in Northern Ireland were on the same page in terms of opposition to it. And how do you see it panning out in Parliament here?
Thank you very much, Brendan. Steve Aiken, MLA. Steve.
Thank you.
very much indeed, and thank you very much, Keir, for your speaking. First of all, making a declaration of interest. As a member of Unite, I actually voted for you, so that's an unusual issue there.
Thank you.
Okay. But the question is a much more serious one. Keir, as you as Prime Minister, will you be a strong advocate for all of the United Kingdom and make abundantly clear that you will make the case for everybody, particularly in Northern Ireland, that the United Kingdom is the way ahead and where we should be indeed, but particularly if you're going to be the Prime Minister?
Thank you very much, Steve. Senator Emer Curry. Emer.
Thank you, Chair. I hope my colleagues forgive me for asking a similar question as I did to Minister Byrne earlier, but this is being live streamed and I've been asked to ask you directly as well your views on the command paper on legacy and the statute of limitations. Minister Byrne said that the prospect of prosecution is lessening over time, but we know this, and more importantly, victims know that. But you need criminal investigations to get to the truth, and you need criminal investigations to be human rights compliant. So can you please outline the Labour Party's views on this important matter today? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emer. Keir, you're getting away live with a number of questions, so we give you the opportunity to respond as comprehensively as you can, please.
Thank you very much. Conor, in relation to Brexit, look, whichever way people voted, it's caused a number of difficulties. There's no doubt about that, but we have all got a duty to work through, and that's why I said what I said about the protocol. And obviously the last 5 years have been difficult. It has put a real strain on the relationship because the implications of Brexit are simply different in Ireland and Northern Ireland to other parts of the United Kingdom, and it's not sensible to pretend that the impact everywhere is the same. In that period, we have worked through a number of the difficulties. There are further challenges ahead. For those challenges to be met, we need to work together, and we need leaders on the pitch. And that's why I've always been concerned when there's been a vacuum, whether that's here or whether that's in Northern Ireland or anywhere else, because as we work forward, we need our political leaders on the pitch so that we can go forward together on this. Amongst the profound lessons I learned when I was working in Northern Ireland is the need to bring communities with you on the journey, not to inflict and impose things on communities. And that's why you need your leaders there operating in that way. And I hope that we can make progress. Pauline, on violence against women and girls, thank you for raising that for starters. It's so important. When I was Director of Public Prosecutions for England and Wales for 5 years, it was amongst the biggest challenges that we had because I was acutely aware that there were criticisms of the way in which cases of violence against women and girls were being treated in our criminal justice system. I was even more profoundly aware that only 1 in 10 cases even gets into our criminal justice system. So whatever we were doing to try and improve the response, 90% of the cases weren't even getting there. And that's about culture change, that's about organisational change, that's about confidence in people coming forward in relation to what has happened to them. And there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done, and it is global. We need to do a lot more here. But for every bit we do on the criminal justice system, and we need to do a lot, we need to do just as much for those cases that aren't coming anywhere near our criminal justice system. Brendan, on the amnesty bill, again, look, where do I start on this? I was Director of Public Prosecutions for England and Wales. I worked closely with the DPP in Northern Ireland. I know, and everybody knows, that the longer it is since something may or may not have happened, the more difficult it is to prosecute. That is actually the case for all criminal offences. And there isn't a particular category where it's more difficult than others. But that doesn't mean that you simply say there won't be any action taken whatsoever. And I'm very concerned and against the proposals the government is bringing forward. My starting place, whenever I try to answer a question like this, particularly in Northern Ireland, is with those that were most impacted, the victims, the surviving victims in some cases, and or their families. When I was in Northern Ireland and Belfast last July, those were the groups that I went to ask their views about this. And they were very, very clear that they did not approve of these provisions. Very clear also, by the way, they hadn't been consulted properly about the provisions. And again, in Northern Ireland to proceed without consulting those most interested is usually to make a huge mistake. But add to that the lack of political support in the political parties. And I think the government really needs to take that off the table, reflect on it and think again, because I do not think it's the right way forward. Steve, thank you for your vote, by the way. Declare my interest in receiving it. But, you know, of course I want to be an advocate of the whole of the United Kingdom and will do so. And it's very important as Prime Minister, or wanted to be Prime Minister, to make that absolutely clear. But also to be absolutely clear that the role of the Prime Minister is to be the honest broker under the Good Friday Agreement. And that's why I said what I said about trust, because that honest broker role is hugely, hugely important. It requires nuance, it requires understanding, and it requires a lot of consultation and a lot of confidence building. And I was saddened leaving Belfast last July, because in all the years I've been working in Northern Ireland, I felt that confidence in the UK as the honest broker was at the lowest I'd ever known it. And that was the big takeaway concern I had coming away last July. I think on legacy, I've said what I've said. You mentioned in particularly the passage of time. Yes, of course, it's much more difficult to prosecute. Usually, there's the longer it is since something happened, the harder it is to then set about proving what may or may not have happened. That is a general principle. It's actually accommodated in the criminal law. When prosecutors and police look at codes, one of the factors they have to take into account is the passage of time in relation to the offence. But it's not a bar. And so in all the time I was prosecuting in England and Wales as Director of Public Prosecution, yes, we took into account the passage of time, but we didn't treat it as a bar to justice. And there are many examples of cases that I've been personally involved in, Stephen Lawrence would be one of them, that show that even when there's been a considerable passage of time, it is still possible to bring a prosecution sometimes when you thought it wasn't possible because of the emergence of different or new evidence. Stephen Lawrence is an example of that, and that's why I do say to the government those proposals, in my view, should be taken off the table and reconsidered. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I want to thank Keir again for his comprehensive address at the outset, and also for his engagement with our colleagues on a range of very important issues through questions. So, Keir, we're very appreciative of your contribution here today.
Thank you.
Yes, Brendan's handing over to me just for a few moments, just to tell you what we're going to be doing now. So in a moment we're going to suspend the Assembly session for this morning, and we're going outside into Westminster Hall. If you follow Amanda, I can't see where Amanda is, but Amanda will show you where to go, and we're going to have a photograph on the stairs by the IPU and the CPA room, which is down the stairs then across Westminster Hall. There's a number of parliamentarians here from the UK who will show you where to go, but it's literally downstairs. There will be a group photograph of everybody, please. So if you gather there, after that we will take you up through Central Lobby and then down through the House of Lords to the Chumley Room, where we'll be having lunch, and we're going to be joined by the Lord Speaker at 1 o'clock. So straight from the photograph and down to lunch, and then we reconvene back here in Westminster Hall to start the session at 1:45 p.m. Okay, so I now suspend the Assembly.